Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a land where winter doesn't knock. It barges in dumps 3 feet of snow on your soul and then sticks around until your fur hat grows mold. Yes, we're bundling up and shuffling our way into 18th century Russia, a time when people fought the cold with willpower and wildly questionable dietary choices. Imagine this, you're curled up on a wide wooden platform bed in a hut that smells faintly of wet fur and boiled onions. Your breath makes little ghosts in the air. Outside, the wind is howling like it lost its keys. Inside, the walls sweat with warmth from a great clay stove the size of a horse and just as temperamental. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Comment your location and what time it is where you're listening. I love seeing where in the world you all are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The fire crackles somewhere behind you as your eyes creak open. You're not alone in this hut. Half your extended family is sprawled nearby, cocooned in rough wool blankets or curled like cats around the warm stove belly. You, being one of the lucky ones, got the corner spot. Less foot traffic, fewer elbows to the ribs. It's early. Not morning, but the coldest hour before the sun considers showing up early. You can already hear someone stomping snow off their boots just outside. The door creaks open, bringing in a puff of white mist and a draft sharp enough to shave your eyebrows. Up a voice grunts. Probably your uncle or someone claiming to be your uncle. You don't look. You've learned not to. You swing your feet over the edge and immediately regret all of your life choices. The floor's made of wood, yes, but spiritually, it's closer to sheet ice. Your toes tingle in a way that's less awakening and more please amputate. Still, you pad to the wash basin and splash your face with water from a cracked ceramic jug. It's only slightly warmer than death. You dry off with something that might have once been a towel or might have once been a goat. Outside, dawn is stretching reluctantly across the sky, more gray than gold. The snow reflects it like a massive mirror, so you squint as you step out in your layered linen and sheepskin coat, which adds about 40 pounds to your overall vibe. Your boots crunch across the frozen earth. Not snow, not slush. Just snow that's been trampled, frozen, trampled again, and now resembles glassy gravel with commitment issues. As you walk toward the woodshed to grab firewood, yes, because no morning is sacred, a rooster screams somewhere in the distance like it just realized it's in Russia. You pass the chicken coop, the privy, and a suspiciously leaning fence. You nod respectfully to each because you live in a world where even the inanimate objects might turn on you if disrespected. Chopping wood in this weather is an exercise in character building, tendon snapping, and quietly screaming into your scarf. Your axe clinks off frozen knots. Splinters fly. The logs occasionally split in satisfying halves, but more often they mock you by cracking a centimeter and stopping there smugly. Eventually, red-faced and victorious as you carry a stack back to the hut. On the way, you notice frost patterns on the windows. Ferns, feathers, delicate starbursts like nature's graffiti. Some people believe those frost flowers are messages from the spirits, and honestly, you're too tired to argue. Inside, the hearth is hungry again. Someone, likely your cousin with 2 left thumbs, let the flames die. You coax it back to life with fresh kindling, a few desperate puffs of breath, and a prayer to St. Nicholas, patron of not freezing your fingers off. You're rewarded with warmth that spreads like melted honey down your spine. The others start stirring. One person sneezes, another mutters in their sleep about fish. Grandma is already awake and peeling something with a knife older than you. She hands you a hunk of black bread, so dense it could be used in construction. You eat it anyway. There's also a slab of something pickled turnip probably, and a splash of yesterday's tea reheated to mildly alarming. Breakfast isn't a feast, it's a truce. Between you and the cold, between you and hunger, between your body and whatever dark thing now lives in your boots. Historians still argue whether peasant diets in 18th century Russia were based on practicality or sheer culinary stubbornness. Either way, the average person got through winter on cabbage, frozen rye bread to sour cream, and enough fermented fish to make your dreams smell like brine. And yes, there's always fish, salted, dried, pickled, smoked. Once your cousin tried burying a fish for a month to see what happened. What happened was a quiet funeral and a very clean shovel. You finish your meal, gather your things, and brace yourself. It's time to face the world. The real day begins not with a sunrise, but with the realization that every piece of clothing you own still smells faintly of goat. As you step outside once more, the cold greets you like an old friend you owe money to, tight, sharp, unforgiving. Your breath puffs out in little clouds. Somewhere far off a bell tolls. Somewhere closer, a dog barks at a passing goose like it's personally offended by feathers. Welcome to winter. Welcome to Russia. Welcome to a morning that will be followed by so many more icy, crusty, cabbage-scented, and full of quiet resilience. The sun rises reluctantly like a spoiled prince being summoned to do manual labor. Its light doesn't warm anything. It just makes the snow sparkle in that smug, blinding way. You wrap your scarf tighter, regretting not stealing the double-layered one from your brother when you had the chance. Today you've been tasked with fetching more food. Not the fresh kind. There is no fresh kind. You're heading to the root cellar for rye flour and that one fish no one dares name but everyone eats eventually. The root cellar is located just beyond the barn down a few icy steps that laugh in the face of human dignity. One wrong move and you're sledding on your spine straight into a pile of frozen carrots. You've done it before. You'll do it again. This time, though, you descend carefully, gripping the frosty handrail carved by generations of calloused hands. Inside, it's somehow colder than outside, a damp kind of cold, like a dungeon that's given up. Baskets of turnips, beets, and withered apples are stacked beside sacks of barley. And there, nestled in a clay basin, is your prize fermented fish. It's technically sturgeon. It was once majestic, probably, but now it's mostly smell and defiance. The lid is sealed with wax and hope. As you lift it, your nose is immediately attacked by a scent that could be described as historically significant. Somewhere between sour milk metal and revenge. You gag slightly respectfully and scoop out a piece wrapped in birch bark. Your ancestors used this technique for centuries, believing it kept the fish protected. Historians still argue whether it actually improved preservation or if everyone's taste buds were just numb from the cold. With your cargo secured in a cloth bag double wrapped for the sake of your dignity, you trudge back to the house, passing a neighbor who gives you a nod that says, Fermented Sturgeon Day. Back inside, you set the fish down on the prep table with a thud that echoes. Grandma barely looks up. She's already sprinkling flour and muttering something that may or may not be a spell. A samovar hisses in the corner. The tea within is strong enough to clean weapons. As she begins slicing the fish, amidst a sound like someone sighing in protest. No one flinches. You don't talk to the fish. The fish has seen things. In another corner of the hut, your sister is layering up. She starts with a tunic, then 2 wool skirts, then an apron, then a shawl, and finally a fur-lined coat that makes her resemble a polite bear. You do the same minus the skirts, and you still end up waddling like an overstuffed pastry. You head out together toward the town, passing rows of huts squatting in snow like half-buried memories. Smoke curls from chimneys, and in the distance, you hear the rhythmic chopping of firewood. The village breathes like one large, cold organism, slow, communal, and just a little resentful. On the main road, sleighs slide past, pulled by horses wearing bells that jingle, more out of warning than joy. One sleigh carries barrels of kvass, another sacks of flour. A third contains a nobleman trying not to make eye contact with the cold. You wave at Mikhail the fishmonger, who is cheerfully yelling at a barrel. It's unclear if there's someone inside or if he just argues with his inventory. He offers you a slice of dried herring. You decline. The fermented sturgeon has already claimed your olfactory innocence for the day. Past the stalls and carts, you reach the fabric cellar. Your sister eyes a bolt of bright red wool. It's expensive, luxurious, and entirely impractical for blending in when the snow gets political. Still, she runs her hand along it like it holds secrets. Maybe for a wedding, she murmurs. Whose, you ask? She shrugs. Someone warmer. You laugh, but not too loudly. The wind carries sound strangely out here, and gossip is a renewable resource. Before returning home, you both stop at the town's communal oven. It's built of stone with soot-streaked walls and a mouth that roars with fire. Bread dough is slid in and marked with carved sticks. You wait your turn, the warmth soaking into your bones in a way that feels almost indecent. You lean against the wall, watching a child chase a runaway mitten, a goose bites someone's boot, and a man try to sneak a second loaf when he thinks no one's looking. He's wrong. An elderly woman with eyes sharper than a wolf's calls him out instantly. Save some for the rest of us, Pavel. He mutters an apology and shuffles away. Bread is sacred, so are manners, especially in winter. As your own loaf is retrieved, crusty, steaming, vaguely shaped like a bear, you wrap it in cloth and tuck it close. It smells like survival, like patience, like that one good moment that makes the other hours more tolerable. On the way back, you pass the local icon vendor. He's set up a small stand with hand-painted wooden panels of saints, each gazing down with expressions ranging from serene to faintly judgmental. You buy a small one for your cousin's name day, St. Paraskeva, protector of women and those who deal with wool, which frankly is everyone you know. By the time you reach home, the sun is starting to dip again. Winter days in Russia are short like the temper of a tea-deprived babushka. Inside, the house is warm again, filled with the smells of bread-boiled grains and a fish that refuses to admit it's dead. You unwrap your layers one by one, each shedding a layer of snow and fatigue. You sit, you sip tea, and you listen to Grandma tell a story about the year the river froze so hard it cracked open and revealed a hidden village underneath. Historians still argue whether that tale is symbolic or the result of moonshine, but no one interrupts her, not even the fish. The sun disappears without ceremony, just a quiet fade into bluish twilight like a candle snuffed in the next room. The world outside the window takes on that strange purplish glow that only snow-covered landscapes can conjure, as if the entire country is exhaling frost through its pores. You're layering again, not because you've undressed, but because no number of garments is ever quite enough. The chill finds your collarbone like a thief, and you know what's coming: a visit to the smithy. One of the door hinges cracked in the cold, and someone has to ask Dmitri to hammer it back into obedience. You trudge down the narrow path behind your house, the snow crunching like stale crackers underfoot. The wind keeps trying to reach your bare eyelids as if aiming for the last bits of exposed humanity. You pass 3 neighbors on your way. 2 nod, 1 just grunts from inside a wool cocoon. The smithy glows like a miniature sun in the distance. Orange sparks leap into the dusk, and you feel the warmth even before reaching the door. Inside, the air hits you like a hot slap. It smells like sweat iron and singed hair, probably the apprentice's. Dmitri the blacksmith greets you with a nod. He's shirtless, which is both impressive and unwise. His beard is frostbitten on one side and slightly on fire on the other. You explain the hinge. He listens, shrugs, and says he'll come by after his tea. That could mean today. It could mean spring. As you wait for him to finish flattening what may or may not be a horseshoe, you stare at the tools on the wall. Tongs, hammers, bellows, and one suspicious ladle. You ask what it's for? He says discipline, then laughs. You do not. The smithy's apprentice, a nervous boy named Vasya, offers you something wrapped in linen. You unwrap it cautiously. It's a biscuit, warm, soft, and filled with something. You bite, possibly fish jam. You nod politely. He looks relieved. Somewhere in the forge, a chicken clucks once and is never seen again. Back outside, you make your way toward the center of the village. A wind picks up, tossing loose snow in tiny spirals that skitter across the ground like frosty spirits. You pull your scarf higher, but your nose is already numb. You feel it more than wear it now. In the distance, a sleigh jingles past its driver, bundled so heavily it's unclear if they're human or just ambitious laundry. Behind the sleigh trots a dog the size of a door, looking deeply disappointed in everyone. The village square is modest, just a cleared space ringed by buildings with peeling whitewash and smoke-stained eaves. In the center, a wooden post leans slightly topped with an iron bell. The bell hasn't been rung in weeks, but it stands ready like a sleepy sentinel waiting for drama. Near the square's edge, you spot Ivan the fur merchant, arranging his wares: rabbit pelts, wolf hides, even a rare fox fur hat that looks like it holds secrets. You reach out to touch a sleeve of reindeer leather, and he slaps your hand, not unkindly, just professionally. No fondling, he mutters, unless you're buying. You apologize and ask about the gloves. He holds up a pair made of sheepskin, the kind lined with soft wool and stitched with frozen ambition. They cost more than you'd make in 3 months, but he offers a discount if you'll help shovel out his storage shed. A fair price for 10 fingers. Historians still argue whether the Russian winter economy was built more on fur trading or sheer spite. Either way, fur was currency, protection status, even dowry. You once heard about a woman who refused a marriage proposal because the man offered rabbit instead of marten. She married a tanner instead. No regrets. You pocket the gloves. You'll return after you've moved a few dozen pounds of snow and possibly wrestled a frozen goat out of the way. For now, you head to the bathhouse. Not for a bath, just for news. The banya is where everything happens: gossip, matchmaking, medicine, and on Thursdays, questionable poetry readings. The bathhouse stands near the river's edge, its roof coated in glistening frost. Steam leaks from every crevice like it's trying to escape. You step inside and are instantly enveloped in a fog of sweat, birch smoke, and deeply personal stories being shared at full volume. Inside, a group of older women are arguing about pickling methods. One insists vinegar is essential, Another swears by snowmelt and prayer. They stop briefly to acknowledge you, then continue louder. You retreat to the corner where two men wrapped in towels are trading ghost stories involving haunted mittens and a priest with suspiciously glowing teeth. Someone offers you a seat near the stove. You accept, sitting on a plank that steams beneath you. The heat is both punishment and reward. You stay until your skin prickles and your thoughts start to float. Someone hands you a birch switch, traditional for banya use. You politely decline. You're not quite ready for the spiritual exfoliation. You step outside once more, red-faced and oddly buoyant. Steam pours from your clothes like you're a misplaced volcano. The cold slaps you with open hands, but your inner warmth holds for now. It's almost night. You make your way home, slowly passing shuttered stalls and icicles that hang like glass daggers from the eaves. The stars are just beginning to emerge, pale and steady above the black silhouette of the forest. At home, the scent of cabbage soup welcomes you, along with the soft clatter of spoons and murmured conversations. You sit, you eat, you thaw. Your grandmother tells a new story about a man who once tamed a blizzard by singing to it. You don't question it, you just nod. And somewhere in the corner, the fermented fish watches you silently. Still not moving, still not dead. Morning again. Or rather, that hazy, pale version of morning that slinks into Russia in midwinter like it's embarrassed to be seen. You sit up slowly, joints clicking like castanets, and stare at your breath fogging in the air above your blanket. Outside, the snow has fallen again, fluffy fresh, and with the quiet menace of something planning to ruin your afternoon. Breakfast is mercifully warm, a porridge of barley and milk, thick enough to patch a wall. You chew, you swallow, you pretend it doesn't taste faintly of last week's cabbage. A small lump of sugar is passed around the table, a luxury that everyone licks once before handing it on. You get 2 licks, luxury 2. Today's mission clothes, specifically proper winter clothes, the kind that turns you into a fashionable potato sack and makes you mildly flame resistant. You're heading to your cousin Elena's place. She's a seamstress, a gossip channel and part-time matchmaker. She also owns a goose that hisses in 3 dialects. The path to her cottage winds past the edge of the forest. Trees lean inward like they're sharing secrets. Snow clings to every branch, each twig outlined like a charcoal sketch. You keep your eyes peeled for fox tracks, or worse, those strange 3-toed prints that old Peter swears are from a frost demon. Historians still argue whether he made it up or just drinks faster than the rest of the village. You knock on Elena's door with a mittened hand. From inside, there's the unmistakable crash of something wooden and the squawk of a goose insulted by your existence. The door opens a crack. Elena peers out, her eyebrows already mid-sarcasm. You look like a molting bear, she says, and yanks you inside. Her workshop is cramped, but warm, filled with bolts of cloth, hanging thread, and strategically placed cats. A small stove burbles in the corner next to a stack of dried mushroom caps, some culinary, some visionary. You don't ask which is which. She tosses you a bundle. Put this on. You're not going to impress anyone looking like a chimney sweep who lost a fight with a snowdrift. You unwrap it, a caftan lined with sheepskin, stitched in red and black thread. Heavy, durable, surprisingly stylish. She spins you around and starts adjusting seams while describing the week's biggest scandal, a man who claimed his boots were stolen by a squirrel. The town is divided. You side with the squirrel. As she works, you ask about the trade. She shrugs. People always need clothes, especially when their old ones freeze to the floor. She pauses, or catch fire from sitting too close to the stove. Again. You remember that incident vividly. The smell lingered for days. Before you leave, Elena insists on adding one more item, a hat. Not just any hat. A yushanka so large it doubles as a portable tent. When you put it on your head, disappears and your vision narrows to a fuzzy tunnel of survival. You thank her, promising to return with pickled turnips or local gossip, whichever she's out of. As you open the door, the goose lunges again. You dodge, barely. Back in the village, you strut a little. You look like someone who could fight a blizzard and win. Or at least talk it down over tea. Your next stop, the local tanner's shop. Your gloves are technically gloves, but mostly air. You need something tougher, preferably with fingers. The tanner Jaeger greets you with a grunt and a face that could tan leather by frowning at it. He shows you his wares, thick mittens made of elk hide boots lined with dog fur from very well compensated dogs, you're assured, and a curious item labeled experimental. You don't ask. You're here for function. You settle on a pair of gloves so stiff they crackle when you bend them. Perfect. He wraps them in paper and ties the bundle with twine. You offer a few kopecks and a half smile. He accepts the coins but ignores the smile. It's that kind of shop. Walking back, the wind picks up. Snow flurries dance sideways like they've got somewhere better to be. You pass two men hauling firewood and arguing about which saint controls the weather. One says Saint Elijah. The other insists it's someone named Boris. You suspect neither are correct, but you admire the confidence. At home, you peel off layers like an onion with trust issues. The new caftan goes on a hook by the stove, still warm from your body. The hat you place on the table, where it immediately slides into dominance over the room's visual landscape. You collapse onto the bench with a groan. Grandma chuckles and hands you a slice of salo-cured pig fat. You chew thoughtfully, the salt numbing your tongue. It's not bad, really. Like meat gum. That melts and then regrets being gum. Salo, you learn, is beloved across all classes. Nobles garnish it with herbs and horseradish. Peasants just slap it on rye and keep walking. Some swear it cures colds. Others use it to patch windows. Historians still argue whether that's metaphor or just multitasking. The evening settles in with the smell of boiled potatoes and onion stew. You eat in silence, the kind of silence that's soft, heavy, and comfortable, like a blanket made of time. Someone plays a flute in the corner. Badly, but no one stops them. Even noise has a place in winter. You look at your new clothes hanging by the fire, steam gently rising off the damp cuffs. Outside, snowflakes drift past the window, fat and lazy. Inside, your belly is full, your fingers are warm, and your boots are drying for tomorrow's trudge into whatever the cold decides to throw at you next. Somewhere in the walls, the fermented fish shifts slightly. You choose not to acknowledge it. The next morning begins the same way most things do in 18th century Russia, with your face buried in a sheepskin blanket and the distant knowledge that your feet no longer belong to you. They've frozen or escaped. Hard to tell. The stove has cooled overnight, leaving the air sharp and still. You pull on your new caftan, blessedly dry now, and it whispers encouragement with every movement. You reach for your boots and find them slightly crispy, as if they've been judging your dreams. Your cousin appears at the door holding a note. Message from the post station, she says, breath curling around her words. They need help on the road. You don't ask questions. In this village, the road could mean anything from a state highway to a suspiciously wide trail forged by migrating goats. But you bundle up, swallow a breakfast of dry barley, and head toward the edge of town with your scarf wrapped high enough to be legally classified as a second face. The road is, in fact, a river. Frozen, solid, and glistening like glass, it stretches far into the horizon. In winter, rivers become roads, sled tracks, and rumor highways. They carry people, fish, and occasionally pigs that no one ever claims. Today, a shipment of letters is being escorted from the Northern Territories. You spot a caravan of low wooden sledges rolling across the ice, each one pulled by a horse with hooves wrapped in cloth to muffle the clatter. It's oddly elegant, like a secret parade of well-fed ghosts. You wave to the lead driver, who looks like a bundle of scarves topped with a single eye. He grunts in recognition and gestures for you to help unload a side sledge. Inside, mailbags, wax-sealed scrolls, and one package leaking what you assume is fish oil. Of course. You take a moment to absorb the landscape. On both banks, birch trees rise like pale matchsticks against the sky. In the distance, you spot a lone figure skating slowly across the river with the kind of grace you can only achieve by completely surrendering your sense of fear or balance. Just as you're thinking how quiet everything is, a sleigh races past an aristocrat's vehicle, no doubt. You can tell by the lacquered wood, the absurdly decorative ironwork, and the coachman wearing a hat that doubles as a personal fortress. Inside, a noblewoman barely glances at you before vanishing into the white blur of distance. You sigh and return to fish oil duty. A few minutes later, one of the sledges hits a patch of rough ice and jolts violently. A sack falls. It bursts open. Fermented fish again. The scent creeps across the ice like a low fog. Everyone stops moving. One man dry heaves. The horses snort and sidestep like they've just remembered their ancestors were wild animals. You gather the fish, repack it, and resecure the sled, but the damage is done. The air is now permanently flavored. A group of crows circle overhead, clearly interested in this turn of events. You wave them off. They ignore you. Crows are like that. Used to be worse, an old mail runner mutters beside you. One year, whole barrel of fermented milk broke open. Took 3 months for the smell to die. 2 if you held your breath. You nod solemnly. Russians may not be able to escape the cold, but they can survive anything with a good shrug. Historians still argue whether this incredible tolerance was resilience fatalism or just really low standards for comfort. But standing here waist-deep in snow, reeking faintly of pickled sadness, you kind of get it. The rest of the delivery is uneventful if you don't count the horse that refused to cross the bridge unless serenaded with a folk song. Luckily, someone knew one. Unluckily, it had 23 verses. By mid-afternoon, you're back in the village, thawing your toes near the stove and sipping lukewarm tea. Your cousin passes behind you, carrying a basket of herbs and muttering something about the goose again. You don't ask. As the sun lowers, your thoughts wander to the strangeness of these roads of ice. They're both practical and poetic, glimmering veins connecting villages carrying letters, stories, trade, even weddings. They disappear by spring, melt into memory, and then freeze all over again. Tonight, there's talk of a sleigh ride to the next village over. You're invited. It's not a question. Nothing ever really is here. You climb into the sledge just after dusk, joining 3 others, wrapped in so many layers it's hard to tell who's who. The driver naturally does not speak. He just clicks his tongue once, and the horses bolt forward like they've remembered something urgent. The sleigh slides effortlessly over the ice runners, whispering against the surface bells, chiming like nervous laughter. You pass the familiar birches, the twisted riverbanks, a distant figure fishing through a hole in the ice. Why he's fishing at night is unclear. Why he's shirtless is even less clear. You decide not to stare. The wind cuts sharper out here. You bury deeper into your caftan and scarf, feeling your eyelids grow heavy with cold. Everything is muted, the world shrinking to moonlight and movement, and the occasional flake of snow landing on your lashes like a frozen eyelash kiss. Suddenly, the driver veers off the main river path and toward a patch of open forest. One of your fellow passengers grunts in protest, but he says nothing. A few minutes later, you see it a makeshift tavern built along the frozen bank. Smoke rises from a crooked chimney. A dog howls once, just to let the night know he's awake. Inside, the air is thick with heat pine resin and something spicy you can't quite place. The tavern is 1 room, 3 benches, 2 barrels of beer, and 0 patients. A balalaika player in the corner strums a sleepy tune, while a woman argues loudly with a man about the correct number of cloves in borscht. You sit grateful. The innkeeper slams a cup of hot spittin' in front of you. It's a drink made from honey water spices and probably ambition. You sip. It punches your tongue, hugs your throat, and wakes up everything south of your lungs. The ride back is slower. The horses are full, the passengers are full, and you're filled with that peculiar Russian contentment, part exhaustion, part warmth, and part acceptance that winter wins. But you get a few small victories in between. You wake to a strange sound, something between a sigh and a squelch. You open one eye and immediately regret it. The room is dark, save for the embers glowing faintly in the stove's belly, and someone is humming off-key nearby. It takes a moment to realize it's your aunt dabbing her cheeks with melted animal fat and preparing for the day, like a warrior going into battle. Makeup in 18th century Russia is not about subtlety. It's about insulation, superstition, and in some cases, psychological warfare. You sit up slowly, watching as she pulls a small tin of coal from a carved box and begins lining her eyelids with all the ceremony of a priest blessing a bear trap. You shuffle over to your corner, still wearing your caftan like a personal yurt, and begin the morning's ritual. First, a splash of water frozen solid. You tap the basin chip off a few shards and decide to skip the face-washing portion of the routine. Instead, you reach for your own version of fashion. You don't have much, but you do have a wax cone of scented animal fat that you tuck into your hat. It slowly melts through the day, running perfume drips down your scalp until you smell like a fancy soup. Supposedly, this is attractive. Historians still argue whether these scent cones were purely for personal delight or an elaborate form of mosquito deterrent. Some believe they were based on older Eastern traditions. Others say it's just what happens when winter limits your options and you run out of soap. You wrap yourself in your full winter regalia linen shirt, wool vest, outer tunic, thick trousers, scarf, mittens, and of course your monumental ushanka. You now look less like a person and more like a migrating haystack with opinions. Outside, the snow is falling again. Big fluffy flakes that coat everything in a quiet hush. The only sounds are the distant groan of trees and a chicken trying to assert dominance over the wind. Your first stop is Tatiana's house. She's the village's unofficial stylist, although her methods involve a lot of beeswax and intense eye contact. She greets you with a grunt and waves you inside. Her hut smells like lavender, onions, and vengeance. She sits you down on a stool that wobbles slightly, then begins brushing your hair with something that might be a hedgehog. You're not allowed to speak, only blink. After the brushing comes the application of protective gloss, a mixture of duck grease clay and what might be crushed berries. She pats it across your face and declares, "There. Now the frost can't eat your skin." Was that a risk, you ask? She doesn't answer. Next come the accessories. You're handed a necklace made of dried bread and amber. One is for fashion, the other is for snacks. You're not told which is which. Tatiana also gives you a small mirror which you aren't sure you want. You look into it anyway. The face staring back is ruddy, slightly shiny, and surprisingly confident, like someone who just won a duel with a soup ladle. You thank her, offering a lump of lard as payment. She accepts it with a nod of professional satisfaction. Leaving her house, you pass a group of children making snow sculptures. One is building a saint. Another is making something suspiciously political. You nod approvingly and head toward the main square, where today's marketplace is buzzing with its usual chaotic energy. Vendors shout across the stalls, their words muffled by layers of wool. A man selling dried mushrooms claims they cure melancholy. Another hawks buttons shaped like miniature bears. One enthusiastic woman is trying to auction off a goose that appears to be possessed. The bidding is slow. You make your way to the perfume merchant, a wiry man named Vadim, who smells like a bouquet of wet fur and ambition. He greets you with a wave and produces a collection of tiny glass vials, each one labeled in shaky Cyrillic Snow Lily Cossacks beer church basement, and ominously Elena's regret. You choose Snow Lily. He dabs it onto a scrap of linen and waves it under your nose. It smells like pine needles, candle wax, and longing. You nod. He wraps the vial in birch bark and hands it to you with a grin that says, "You're going to regret this, but also thank me." Historians still argue whether Russian perfume traditions stem from practical necessity or sheer defiance of sensory norms. Either way, you now smell slightly floral with a hint of desperation. It's a win. You pass the mirror peddler. On the way out, a woman with 12 mirrors hanging from her coat like glittering armor. She offers you one for free. You decline. You've seen enough of yourself today. At the edge of the square, a small crowd gathers around a man giving a winter skincare demonstration. He slathers his face with honey and insists this is how Peter the Great maintained his cheekbones. Someone throws a radish at him. He thanks them. By midday, the snow has thickened into a slow, constant drift. You return home heavier than when you left emotionally, and also because of the fish jerky hidden in your pockets. Inside, the warmth is like a lullaby. You strip off your outer layers with the dramatic flair of someone escaping from wool-based captivity. You toss your hat onto the bench and shake the snow from your scarf like a victorious dog. Grandma takes one look at you and says, "You smell like ambition. Sit down and eat." Lunch is bliny thin pancakes served with sour cream jam, or in your case, a questionable mushroom sauce. You devour them, glad to taste something that doesn't hiss or sparkle. The rest of the day is slower. You sit by the stove, your hands wrapped around a clay mug of tea, and listen as your uncle tunes his balalaika. Outside, the snow keeps falling. Inside, everything feels wrapped in steam and sleep. And in the shadows near the pantry, the fermented fish continues its eternal slumber. Still not dead, still part of the family. Evening settles like wool over the village, thick, warm, a little itchy. The world outside the window disappears into shades of blue and ash, where trees become shadows, and snow takes on the softness of dreams. Inside, the fire pops gently, casting dancing orange ghosts on the ceiling beams. You stretch, sigh, and start pulling your boots on again. Tonight, you're visiting the schoolhouse, not for learning. Learning already happened this week and was declared a draw. No, tonight is for something arguably more dangerous, a village poetry reading. The schoolhouse is one of the few stone buildings in the village built back when someone thought it would impress a traveling inspector. It didn't, but it hasn't fallen down, which in this climate counts as a rave review. The path there is crusted with frozen footprints, some human, some possibly bear. You decide not to investigate. The door creaks open to reveal a warm, dim room filled with mismatched benches, flickering candles, and faces that range from half asleep to theatrically alert. You find a seat near the stove already occupied by a very serious cat. The cat refuses to move. You sit slightly to the left, accommodating its claim to your evening. At the front of the room, Petya, a young man with too many scarves and not enough self-awareness, clears his throat and begins reciting a poem about snow and longing, and a snowflake who doesn't feel special anymore. It's something. The room listens politely. In Russia, politeness and suffering often go hand in hand. When he finishes, a smattering of gloved applause follows. Then Nadia, the baker's daughter, stands to read a piece about lost mittens and unrequited jam. You begin to suspect no one in this room is okay. Your turn is mercifully skipped. Someone remembers you once rhymed vodka with Nadia and you've never lived it down. The event ends with an improvised song from an elderly man named Fyodor, who insists he once serenaded Catherine the Great. Historians still argue whether this is true or just something he dreamed after eating expired goose liver. Afterward, people mill about sipping kvass from chipped mugs and gossiping beneath their breath, which looks like smoke in the candlelight. You overhear someone mention that the tanner's goose is missing again. You say nothing. You have your suspicions. Outside, the wind has settled. Snow hangs in the air like powdered silence. You walk home slowly, each footstep muffled your breath, rhythmic and steady. The stars are faint tonight, hidden behind a thin veil of clouds, as if even the heavens have tucked themselves under a thick quilt. Back at the house, you step into the comforting glow of the hearth. Grandma is asleep in her chair, her hands still gripping a half-knitted sock. You gently cover her with a shawl and stoke the fire. The embers sigh in appreciation. You climb up to the sleeping loft and crawl beneath your fur blanket. It's still warm from earlier and you sink into it like bread into stew. The walls creak softly. The cat has followed you and now sleeps on your feet. You decide not to fight it. And just as your eyes begin to close, you hear it, the unmistakable crunch of snow outside, followed by a sharp tap on the door. A visitor. You creep down, heart thumping like a festive drum, and open the door to find Stephen, the town's traveling merchant, covered in snow and holding a sack that smells suspiciously of spice and fish. Trady whispers like it's a secret or a dare. You nod. You always nod to Stepan. He steps inside and shakes the snow from his coat. From the sack, he pulls out a brick of fermented rye bread, a jar of pickled garlic, and something wrapped in embroidered cloth. He peels back the layers to reveal a fur hat with a silver clasp. You blink. I found it near Tver, he says. On a horse, no rider, just the hat. You don't ask questions. Instead, you offer him 3 candles, a half-wheel of dried cheese, and a favor redeemable during snowstorms. He accepts. After he leaves, you hold the hat in your hands. It's soft, warm, and strangely comforting, like it remembers a story you haven't heard yet. Historians still argue whether village trade networks in Russia were driven by necessity, friendship, or sheer chaos. You suspect it's a blend of all 3 with a sprinkle of superstition and the occasional illegal pickle. You place the hat beside your bed. The cat examines it, approves, and curls around it like a guardian. You smile, pull the blanket tighter, and drift into sleep with the quiet knowledge that even in the bitterest winters, something always finds its way to you. A poem, a friend, a hat, a goose-related mystery. And outside, snow keeps falling in slow, deliberate silence. The world breathes in and out, and everything holds. The next morning arrives disguised as fog. Everything outside the window looks smudged, like someone rubbed the world with a mitten and called it done. You rise slowly, every joint reluctant, like an old door hinge being asked to dance. Today is laundry day. Not the exciting kind where you toss things into a machine and walk away. No. This is the kind of laundry day that involves icy river water communal tubs, gossip loud enough to summon saints, and the overwhelming scent of soap made from things you'd rather not name. You bundle up in layers that laugh at modesty, sling your laundry bundle over your shoulder and head for the river's edge. You know what awaits you, a battalion of village women armed with wooden paddles, strong opinions, and the stamina of horses on espresso. The communal washing platform sits just above the frozen river, built on logs that creak ominously with every step. A hole has been cut in the ice, ringed by frost-covered buckets and a few haunted-looking garments already soaking. You greet Aunt Raisa, commander of the wash brigade. She nods curtly and hands you a paddle. Hit it like it owes you money, she says, referring to your frozen tunic. You obey. The rhythm of laundry begins dip, scrub, slap, wring, repeat. Soap bubbles freeze before they can burst. Your fingers tingle with numbness, then with pain, then with something close to enlightenment. Nearby, 2 women are engaged in the age-old ritual of gossip warfare. You catch snippets between slaps of wet cloth. She's using store-bought starch again. Her tablecloth could cut glass. Well, at least her husband's not eating pickled eel by the barrel. Oh, don't start with eel. You remember what happened at Nadia's wedding? Everyone remembers. No one speaks of it. A young girl is sent to fetch more soap from a nearby hut. She returns carrying a lumpy gray bar the size of a squirrel. It smells like pine smoke and unresolved trauma. Perfect. As you scrub, you steal glances at the scenery. The river, though mostly frozen, still murmurs beneath the ice. The birch trees bend slightly, weighed down by snow like tired dancers. And above, the sun finally peeks through a pale coin tossed into a cold blue sky. You wring out your last shirt, now stiff enough to stand on its own, and hang it on a nearby rack to freeze into what will later pass for dry. The wind whistles past, catching the hems and turning the clothesline into a gallery of flapping ghosts. Your hands are red, your back aches, your ears have stopped participating in reality. But your laundry is done, and that means something. Historians still argue whether communal laundry was more about cleanliness or community cohesion. Either way, the river remembers every secret ever whispered near its icy shore. Before heading home, you sit with the women on a log by the fire pit. Someone pours tea into cracked mugs and you wrap your hands around yours like it's the last warm thing in the universe. You're offered a biscuit hard as regret, but sweet. You accept it. You've earned it. Conversation drifts from laundry to marriage rumors, to crop predictions to the goose that still hasn't turned up. Aunt Risa suggests it's living with a family of hares now. Everyone nods. Stranger things have happened. You part ways with the washing brigade and make your way home, cradling a few still damp garments to your chest. A passing dog eyes your socks. You make it clear they're not on the menu. At home, Grandma has hung a kettle above the stove and is poking at the fire with a ladle. It's unclear if that's intentional or if she's just lost her poker again. She hands you a slice of black bread and gestures toward the table where today's newspaper sits, slightly singed, slightly damp, entirely unreadable. You eat in silence, letting the warmth crawl slowly back into your limbs. The bread is stale, but the butter is fresh. You take small victories where you can. Later, you drape your laundry near the stove, turning the room into a steam chamber that smells like soap ash and linen. The cat disapproves and relocates to the pantry, presumably to interrogate the fermented fish. Feeling emboldened by your domestic triumph, you decide to tackle your boots. They've begun to develop personalities, mostly irritable ones. You scrape off the crusted ice, rub them down with bear fat, thanks Stepan, and patch a small hole using thread made from horsehair and stubbornness. Outside, snow begins again, soft and soundless. The sky dims early, as it always does in this season, and by the time you light the evening lamp, the world has already curled in on itself, ready for another long night. You sit by the window sipping tea and watching the snowflakes tumble past the glass. They swirl and dance, catching the lamplight in their descent. You think about the washing platform, the fire pit, the quiet strength of the women, and the strange comfort of routine. Tomorrow will bring something new, perhaps a visit from the priest, or news of the goose's return, or an impromptu sleigh race through the orchard. Or perhaps just more snow, more soup, more stories half whispered between chores. You pull your scarf tighter around your neck, not out of cold, but habit. And just before you rise, you spot a familiar figure down the road, the goose walking confidently beside the tanner, as if the last week never happened. You stare. The goose stares back. Then it turns flaps once and disappears behind the bakery. You say nothing. Some things are better left unresolved. The next day begins with shouting, the kind of shouting that echoes through frost-laced walls and makes you regret every decision that led to being conscious. You sit up fast, bump your head on the low ceiling beam, and hear the words clearly this time. The poet's gone missing. You blink, stretch, and peer out the frosted window. A small crowd has gathered near the well. Among them, Petya, the aspiring snowflake poet, his grandmother, shouting the loudest, a woman holding two mittens that may or may not be his, and the baker looking suspiciously amused. You bundle up and head out. Turns out Petya was last seen wandering toward the woods yesterday afternoon, muttering about finding a rhyme for despair. He never returned. Search parties are being organized. One team is heading toward the riverbank, another toward the old chapel ruins. You're assigned to the edge of the woods, also known as absolutely where he would go to cry dramatically. You join two others, Elena the seamstress, and Boris, a stoic man who once stared down a bear and politely asked it to move. It did. The trees loom ahead, coated in snow and silence. Your boots crunch across icy patches. Your breath billows into the dim morning light, and Elena whispers theories about Petya's fate. Maybe he joined a band of traveling minstrels. Maybe he finally froze into a metaphor, Boris grunts. You pass a birch tree with something carved into its bark, bad poetry probably. Further in, the air grows quieter, heavier. You find footprints, then drag marks, then dramatically half buried in snow, a mitten and a notebook titled Ode to Wet Wool. Elena picks it up. He was definitely here. You follow the trail another 50 meters, and find him sitting upright in a snowbank alive, very cold, and absolutely composing a verse about how the frost caresses the soul's most vulnerable edge. You wrap him in a blanket. He resists. He claims the cold was helping. You and Boris each grab an arm and drag him home anyway. Historians still argue whether Russian poets in the 18th century were deeply artistic or just allergic to common sense. Whatever the truth, they often walked a blurry line between inspiration and hypothermia. By midday, Petya is back in his hut, sipping hot broth and editing stanzas. The village breathes easier, though several people now owe each other kopecks over lost bets. One woman had guessed kidnapped by geese. Another eloped with a snowdrift. You reward yourself with a stop at the bakery. Nadia greets you with her usual brisk energy and flour in her eyebrows. She offers you a pierogi, a warm pastry filled with mushroom onion and just enough mystery to keep things interesting. You bite into it and briefly believe in angels. While you eat, you sit by the oven and warm your toes. Several others drift in, some looking for gossip, others just for heat. Conversation swirls like steam off the samovar in the corner. Someone mentions a traveling priest arriving next week. Another says a barrel of honey mead has gone missing. Someone claims it was the goose again. No one challenges the idea. Outside, a light snow falls. Inside, you sit wrapped in warmth and the scent of yeast and cinnamon. For a moment, time stretches like dough under gentle hands. After lunch, you head toward the chapel ruins more out of curiosity than duty. The stone walls worn by weather and legend sit crumbling at the edge of the woods. Icicles hang from the old arches like chandeliers in mourning. You enter carefully. The snow muffles your footsteps. Inside, a frozen icon still clings to one corner wall. St. Basil, likely. His face is faded, but kind. Someone has left a candle stub burning beneath him. The wax drips onto stone, slow and reverent. In one corner, you find a pile of offerings, dried berries, a folded scarf, a wooden spoon. These chapels may no longer host sermons, but they still collect hopes, grief, and the occasional snack-based prayer. You sit for a moment on a broken pew, letting the stillness settle around you. Your breath rises slowly. You imagine the whispers of generations, the snowstorm sermons, the frostbitten hymns. Historians still argue whether these chapel ruins served as secret gathering places, memorials, or just very inconvenient picnic spots. Whatever their purpose, they hum with memories soft and persistent. As you leave, a crow watches you from the archway. It tilts its head caws once and flies off toward the village. You decide not to follow it. You've made that mistake before. Back home, the sun begins its lazy descent. You find your boots steaming gently by the stove. Grandma hands you a thick woolen vest she claims was knitted during a particularly tense chess match in 1784. You don't question it. Dinner is buckwheat with mushroom slices of pickled cucumber and a generous spoonful of smetana. Simple, rich, satisfying. You eat slowly, savoring every bite while Petya mumbles rhymes in the corner and tries to make fermentation sound romantic. As night falls, the village returns to its soft, snow-draped rhythm. Doors close, lamps glow. The wind murmurs its lullaby across rooftops and chimneys. You curl into your blanket, the cat once again claiming your legs, and close your eyes with the image of St. Basil still warm in your mind. Outside, somewhere beyond the trees, a goose honks once firmly. You smile. The mystery continues. You wake to the unmistakable clinking of glass, a sound that in any other place might mean merriment, a celebration, perhaps even wine. Here, in 18th century Russia, it means only one thing: tea. And not just any tea. Strong tea. Tea that could strip paint. Tea that's more philosophy than beverage. You descend the ladder from the loft, still wrapped in your sleep-wrinkled caftan, and find Grandma already seated near the samovar. That great gleaming metal creature bubbling and hissing with all the solemnity of a steam-powered priest. A teapot sits atop it like a crown, gently steeping what must be the 10th brew from the same leaves. She gestures at the table without a word. There's black bread jam made of something vaguely berry-like, and 2 sugar cubes, prized possessions, in a house where sugar is stored like treasure and hoarded like regret. You're allowed one. You drop the sugar cube into your cup and sip carefully. The tea is dense dark and tastes faintly of smoke and iron. It slides down your throat with the elegance of a velvet axe. You wince, then sip again. Tea in Russia is not a casual drink. It's an event, a ritual, a declaration of resilience. Some say that the deeper the winter, the stronger the tea must be, as though caffeinated courage might help you shovel through another 3 months of ice and existential dread. Historians still argue whether Russian tea culture originated more from Chinese trade or the Orthodox Church's love of long, complicated conversations about nothing. Either way, the samovar is sacred. You do not mock the samovar. After breakfast, you're dispatched to fetch firewood and something for the noon meal. Grandma hands you a small basket, a note written in beautiful but passive-aggressive cursive, and a handful of kopecks that feel like they've been warmed on the windowsill of a czar's palace. You pull on your boots, your gloves, your scarf, and your second scarf, and step outside. The morning air is a slap followed by an awkward hug. It's not quite bitter yet, but it's threatening to be. The road to the firewood stall winds past the square where the local fishmonger is yelling at a bucket. The bucket appears unmoved. You stop by the vendor and exchange pleasantries, which in winter means grunting and descending tones. He offers you a piece of smoked pike, which smells better than it has any right to. You decline mostly because you still remember what happened last time you accepted a sample and forgot to chew. At the firewood stall, you're handed a bundle of birch logs neatly tied with twine and slightly steaming from their overnight nap beneath a tarp. The vendor Sergey, known for his one eyebrow and 3 stories about wolves, asks if you've heard the latest news. Apparently, someone spotted a nobleman sneaking into the village before dawn. Alone. No sleigh, just fine boots, a satchel, and an expression like he'd misplaced a war. Speculation has already begun. A runaway lover, a disgraced officer, a time-traveling merchant with a fear of horses. You promise to keep your eyes open, though not too open. You've learned that too much curiosity around nobility is like poking a bear that owns land. With your firewood slung over one shoulder and your basket tucked under the other, you return home to find Grandma already preparing lunch. The kitchen smells like onions, dill, and quiet judgment. She accepts your purchases, glances at the note you were supposed to deliver, and says nothing. You apologize. She still says nothing. You live in fear. You chop the wood in the side yard, the axe blades sinking into birch with satisfying thunks. It's honest work. Cold, rhythmic, and loud enough to drown out Petya's latest poem, which he's reciting to the dog with questionable conviction. Back inside, lunch is served cabbage soup, thick with potatoes and mystery meat, and a second round of tea that seems stronger than the first. You wonder if Grandma's blending it with tar. You don't ask. During the meal, Uncle Mitya drops in with news the nobleman is staying at the inn. He has a suitcase lined with silk and no visible reason to be here. He tipped the innkeeper 5 kopecks and requested silence. Naturally, no one's talking about anything else. Speculation flourishes like mold in a damp cellar. Your aunt believes he's a spy. Your cousin insists he's a ghost. Grandma says he's probably just divorced. After the meal, you wrap up once again and decide to see for yourself. The inn sits at the edge of town, one story slightly crooked, with a sign that swings even when there's no wind. The door creaks like it has opinions. Inside, the air is warm and smells of stew dust and too many secrets in one room. The innkeeper nods at you and points toward the back, where a man sits alone staring into a bowl of something steaming. He's well-dressed, quiet, and definitely not from around here. His boots are polished, his beard is trimmed, his expression somewhere between "don't speak to me" and "especially don't ask about my boots." You sit a few tables away, sipping a mug of apple cider that tastes faintly of vinegar and ambition. The nobleman never looks up, but you're certain he notices everything. You lean in toward the innkeeper. What's he doing here? She shrugs. He's rich, quiet, and pays early. I'm not asking questions. Fair enough. You leave after finishing, your cider boots creaking against the floor. Outside, the wind has picked up again, blowing snow into small drifts that whisper against your calves. You pull your scarf tighter and make your way home. By evening, word of the nobleman has reached everyone. Petya's writing a ballad. Nadia's baked extra pastries just in case. Elena's already stitched him into a wedding dream. You eat your evening porridge quietly, the room filled with candlelight and the soft clicking of Grandma's knitting needles. Somewhere outside, the wind howls. Somewhere inside, a mystery brews. And just as you're about to drift off, the door creaks open. A breeze slips in. And there, standing in the entryway, is the nobleman himself, holding a bottle of vodka and a smile that says, "I heard someone here brews a proper cup of tea." The room goes still. Even the fire pauses mid-crackle. Grandma doesn't blink. You don't breathe. The cat lifts its head and stares with the intensity of a midwife at a surprise triplet situation. The nobleman stands in the doorway, snow dusting his shoulders, his velvet coat catching the light like a painting that's forgotten to age. He's holding the bottle of vodka with both formality and hope as if it's a peace offering or a magic key. You're not sure which. I heard someone here brews a proper cup of tea, he says again, the words laced with that rich, slow enunciation that only comes from a childhood filled with tutors and too many staircases. Grandma raises one eyebrow, then one ladle. If you're looking for tea, she says, leave your boots by the door. He does, immediately, a man of taste and perhaps survival instinct. You clear a spot at the table as he enters, shrinking slightly in the presence of so many doilies. He sits politely, placing the vodka on the table with reverence. It's a tall bottle, the label peeling and handwritten, clearly homemade, possibly dangerous. The good kind. Grandma prepares a samovar again, this time with more ceremony than usual. You can tell she's impressed, if only because she isn't muttering about wasting tea on city bones. While it heats, the nobleman speaks. My name is Andrei Nikolaevich Volkov. He begins, formerly of St. Petersburg, currently displaced. He says this like someone describing a pair of socks that no longer fit, but were once quite fashionable. You're not unsure how formal to be, so you settle on respectful curiosity in an awkward posture. I've come, he continues, to clear my head. Perhaps start over. And I heard this village has honesty and decent jam. There it is, the real reason. Honesty and jam. Elena would swoon. Grandma pours the tea, hands him a cup, and places a slice of black bread with salted butter beside it. No jam, yet she's testing him. He sips the tea. He doesn't flinch. You hear a chair creak in approval. The cat purrs. A mouse in the wall changes its mind and scurries away. Conversation drifts like wood smoke. He tells you of court life, endless winter balls and gilded halls where people danced in layers of silk, while servants quietly died of frostbite outside. Of officers in bearskin cloaks boasting of duels they never fought. Of politics always swirling, never settling. He doesn't say what drove him here, but he doesn't have to. Sometimes the cold is the only honest thing left. Historians still argue whether noblemen who vanished into rural life were running from scandal, boredom, or themselves. You suspect it's a blend of all three, with a dash of heartbreak and a splash of winter silence. After tea, he produces a small leather pouch. For your hospitality, he says, offering it to Grandma. She opens it and snorts. Spices. From someone who's never peeled a potato in his life. She takes it anyway, tucks it into the cupboard like it's contraband. As night deepens, he prepares to leave. Stay, Grandma says suddenly. We've got a spare bed, and the fish hasn't tried to kill anyone lately. He pauses. I beg your pardon. You nod solemnly. Don't worry, it only stares. He smiles that careful nobleman's smile and agrees. While you help make the bed in the guest nook, once used for drying mushrooms, now upgraded to human use, he tells you he misses firewood, the sound of it splitting, like something final, clean, not like words. You hand him a blanket that smells like apples and old stories. Before sleep, you both stand near the door watching snow drift past the window in that slow, secretive way it always does. He clears his throat. Do you think the goose is real? You glance toward the pantry. I think the goose is waiting. He nods. You both go to bed. In the morning, the nobleman chops wood before breakfast. By noon, he's carrying sacks for the baker. By dusk, he's sitting in the square with Petya, listening to a poem about snow that doesn't feel quite as ridiculous anymore. The village doesn't ask questions. It simply absorbs him the way it absorbs snow and secrets and old men with quiet regrets. That night, as you sip tea beside the fire, Grandma hands you a piece of rye bread with blackcurrant jam. He earned it, she says. And outside in the distance, a low honk echoes across the snow. You glance toward the window. No goose in sight, but the air feels heavier somehow. Balanced, like a story has moved one line closer to its end. The next morning is so cold it feels personal. The air bites not in the poetic snowflake kisses kind of way, but more like a weasel with frost-covered teeth. You wake with a grunt and a strong desire to never leave your blanket again. But outside, the village calls, or rather, yells. There's been an incident at the river. You drag yourself from the warmth of your bed, pull on your layers, now including the nobleman's donated scarf, which smells faintly of leather and diplomacy, and head out into the fresh, ankle-deep snow. At the edge of the riverbank, a group has gathered. Children are whispering. The adults are muttering. And in the middle of it all stands Anya, the widow who sharpens knives better than anyone in the province, holding a bent ice fishing spear and looking thoroughly unimpressed. A hole has opened in the ice. Not a fishing hole, not a natural crack. This one is elaborate, carved, like someone spent a very specific amount of time trying to reach the water below with a sense of style. Nearby, a small pile of dried reeds, a half-eaten pickled egg, and a leather-bound book with frostbitten pages written entirely in Church Slavonic. You peer into the hole. The water swirls beneath the surface in slow spirals, dark and ancient. Reflections tremble on its surface, clouds, birch branches, and something else. The nobleman appears beside you. Looks like a ritual, he says softly. Grandma snorts behind him. Looks like someone got bored and poetic again. Petya raises a hand. I swear it wasn't me this time. Historians still argue whether ice rituals were rooted in pagan tradition, Christian desperation, or winter-induced cabin fever. You suspect all three. But the book, that's real, old, and it doesn't belong to anyone in the village. The only clue is a small wax-stamped mark inside the cover. The sigil of a hermit monastery believed to have vanished decades ago during a particularly judgmental blizzard. This changes things. The priest is summoned. He arrives hours later, bundled like a nesting doll in trailing steam. He glances at the book, nods once, and takes it without a word. I'll keep it safe, he says. Then don't go near the hole. Which is exactly how you guarantee everyone will. The next morning, you do. You sneak down early, scarf pulled tight, boots creaking on the frost. The hole still sits there, eerily perfect. The water beneath it now glows faintly. Not enough to call supernatural. Just enough to feel like someone left a candle burning under the river. You drop a pebble into it. The ripple echoes longer than it should. The water doesn't swallow the stone, it absorbs it. Slowly. Behind you, something moves. You turn, just a tree branch brushing the snow. But it feels like a warning. Back in the village, people are whispering about the hole. It's become a minor obsession. Someone leaves an offering of salted pork near it. Someone else reads poetry aloud beside it, hoping it'll answer back. The goose, yes, that goose sits next to it all day, staring silently like it understands something you don't. The nobleman, meanwhile, seems fascinated. He sketches the sigil from memory, cross-references it with old documents, and mutters about monks who mapped frozen stars. He's spiraling in that delightful aristocratic way that ends with either great discoveries or dramatic fainting spells. To calm nerves, the village decides to host a winter meal near the river as a sort of good faith offering to whatever may or may not live beneath it. The tables are set with bliny stewed mushrooms, honey bread, boiled potatoes, and sweet poppy rolls. Buckets of spite and steam beside barrels of fermented kvass. Children run about waving carved ice spoons. A dog steals 3 pastries and is declared mayor of the meal. You sit beside the nobleman and watch as Grandma offers a prayer not to saints but to the river itself. We've lived with it longer than we've lived with any czar, she says. Might as well be polite. Everyone raises their mugs. The river says nothing, but the glow in the hole fades slightly. That night you dream of icy corridors beneath the river, monks in fur robes chanting into caverns, lined with frozen candles, and a fish, enormous, glowing ancient, swimming silently in circles beneath it all. You wake with a shiver and find a small, smooth stone on your windowsill shaped exactly like the wax sigil from the book. You show it to Grandma. She squints at it. If the river wants to talk, it can use its words. Then she makes you tea, stronger than usual, just in case. Snow falls steadily the next day, not in flurries or squalls, but in a calm, determined way, like someone shaking powdered sugar over the whole world. You step outside with your boots crunching through a pristine crust, the kind of snow that hushes every sound and makes the village feel like a snow globe that's decided to take itself seriously. You're not even out of the yard when you hear it tambourines. Faint at first, then louder. By the time you reach the square, the noise is unmistakable, bells, clapping, laughter, and the unmistakable rhythm of people stomping to keep their blood flowing. Someone's getting married. You stand there blinking through the gentle snowfall, watching as 3 women in matching velvet shawls dance in a wide circle, surrounding a man holding a bundle of herbs and what appears to be a terrified chicken. This is the prelude. The wedding procession moves from house to house, gathering gifts, chants, and increasingly confused relatives. You're pulled into the circle by someone who might be a cousin. You clap along, stomp your boots, and try not to trip over the bride's uncle, who is already drunk and trying to teach the tambourine how to flirt. The bride appears finally wearing a crown of dried flowers and a dress so layered it has a gravitational pull. Her cheeks are pink from cold and nerves. The groom, meanwhile, wears a look of delighted panic in what may or may not be his father's coat. They exchange blessings beneath the village archway, a structure made of birch poles, ribbon, and seasonal passive-aggressive symbolism. A priest mumbles something important. A child sneezes. A goat walks through the ceremony and is offered a snack. Then it's off to the wedding feast. Held in the town hall, usually reserved for council meetings, tax arguments, and amateur theater, the space has been transformed. Candles flicker in every corner. Long tables groan under the weight of roast duck, sauerkraut, mushroom dumplings, and towering loaves of braided bread. You're seated between Petya, who is reciting a poem to his soup, and the nobleman who seems amused by the whole thing. It's like the court, he whispers, but warmer and with better food. Across from you, Elena is trying to teach a visiting cousin from Minsk how to eat pickled garlic without blinking. So far, the cousin is losing. Someone strikes up a balalaika. A second joins in, then a drum appears, and suddenly the whole room is vibrating with rhythm, laughter, and the sound of boots tapping in time. You're handed a shot of vodka and a hunk of bread. Tradition. You toast to the couple, then to the table, then to winter, then to goats. No one remembers why, but it feels right. Historians still argue whether Russian village weddings were sacred rituals, social pressure cookers, or elaborate excuses to consume 2 months' worth of food in a single evening. This one is all three. Midway through the feast, the nobleman stands, clears his throat, and begins a toast in verse. It's terrible, charming, heartfelt, but utterly lacking in rhythm. You've never seen a man attempt to rhyme cabbage with advantage and mean it. Still, the villagers cheer. One old woman weeps into her mushroom roll. The nobleman bows, slightly flushed. Later, you escape the hall for a moment of quiet. The snow has slowed, the stars have returned, and the night hums with that deep winter stillness when even the trees seem to hold their breath. You walk down to the frozen river where the wedding party will eventually continue with games involving sleighs, fire, and moderate injury. For now, though, the bank is quiet, until you see the goose. It's perched on the edge of the ice hole, watching, always watching. Next to it, a slice of wedding cake. You're not sure who left it there or whether it was a joke, a tribute, or an accident. But the goose leans down, takes a bite, and nods once, solemnly. You turn back toward the village head, spinning slightly from drink song and the surrealism of poultry with opinions. Back inside, the dancing has intensified. People are standing on tables. A man is juggling pickles. The priest is teaching someone to waltz while holding a loaf of bread like a partner. The bride and groom beam, flushed with joy and soup. You join in. How could you not? At one point, you're spun into a circle of people who may or may not be related to you. Someone tosses a handful of pine needles into the air and shouts a proverb you don't understand. You shout it back anyway. By the end of the night, your feet hurt, your scarf is missing, and someone has tied a ribbon around your hat. You find yourself walking home with the nobleman, both of you slightly tipsy and very aware that tomorrow's headaches will be sponsored by poor decisions in cabbage. That he says was the best diplomatic summit I've ever attended. You nod. And somewhere behind you, faint and smug, a honk echoes across the night. You both pretend not to hear it. The sun comes up slowly the next day, dragging its golden feet across the snow, like it too was up too late dancing with strangers and dodging rogue pickles. You groan, roll over, and discover 3 things. You're still wearing your boots. Your scarf is now tied in a decorative bow around your pillow. Someone has left a beet in your pocket. You don't ask questions. You drink water from a ceramic jug, chew a chunk of black bread like it insulted your family, and slowly reassemble your body. Outside, the village is eerily quiet, hungover not just in body but in spirit. The streets are empty, the snow undisturbed except for a few bird tracks and the unmistakable trail of someone who clearly lost a mitten and then their dignity. You decide to walk it off. Destination, the temple. It's not a massive stone cathedral or a gleaming church dome. It's a low wooden building with carved doors and soot-darkened beams tucked between the trees like it's hiding from time. Smoke drifts from its chimney. Bells do not ring. This place doesn't need to announce itself. Inside, it smells of incense, pine resin, and reverence. The walls are crowded with icons, faces of saints painted in deep reds and golds. Some chipped, some faded all, watching you like they know what you did with that beat. A lone priest stands by the altar, arranging candles with the kind of care usually reserved for newborns or antique porcelain. He nods when you enter, but says nothing. Words feel too loud in here. You sit on a bench near the back and breathe in the silence. Candles flicker. The wooden walls creak with slow, ancient satisfaction. For a moment, nothing needs fixing, fetching, or fermented. Until, of course, the goose arrives. You hear it before you see it, a soft pat, pat, pat of webbed feet on wooden floorboards. It waddles in through the open door like it's late for confession, pauses, stares directly at the priest, and then hops onto a bench. The priest doesn't flinch. "I see you brought your assistant," he murmurs. You don't respond. You just nod. The goose closes its eyes and rests. The priest begins a quiet chant in Old Church Slavonic words, curling through the air like warm smoke. You don't understand most of it, but the tone is soothing, round-edged and steady, like the language itself is tucking you into bed. You sit like that for a while. Goose, bench, icons, smoke. You're not sure if this is prayer meditation or an elaborate nap, but it feels right. Eventually, the priest finishes, walks over, and hands you something unexpected, a small packet wrapped in wax paper. Inside salt, a dried herb sprig, and a tiny wooden cross. "For protection," he says, "and seasoning." You thank him. He shrugs. It works for both. Historians still argue whether the blending of sacred ritual and everyday practicality in Russian Orthodoxy was theological design or just very efficient multitasking. In this village, it's both. You can bless your bread and eat it too. As you leave the temple, the snow has picked up again, falling in slow, weightless spirals. The goose follows for a few paces, then turns and waddles back to its bench. You don't question it. On the way back to the village center, you run into the nobleman. He looks freshly combed, slightly less pale, and miraculously less hungover than you. He carries a small notebook in one hand, a very large onion in the other. He raises the onion, a gift from the baker, he says, apparently for emotional support. You walk together toward the bathhouse. The banya is warm, steamy, and exactly what your body needs. You peel off layer after layer until you resemble something vaguely human and lower yourself onto a cedar bench. Across from you, Boris the Stoic is swatting himself with a birch branch, muttering what may be either poetry or curse words. The nobleman enters, sighs dramatically, and sits beside you. "Do you think it's always like this here?" he asks. You shrug. Sometimes it's weirder. Steam rises, joints creak, a boy tosses snow onto the stove, and it hisses like a cornered cat. Later, wrapped in towels and respect for life itself, you both sit outside cooling off. Snowflakes land on your shoulders. You don't care. That evening, the nobleman hosts a supper, a modest one. Just a few villagers, a pot of stewed lentils, pickled apples, and a surprisingly good apple pie made by Elena, who refuses to admit she's trying to impress him. She brings it over with all the ceremony of a diplomat delivering terms of surrender. Conversation drifts. Petya reads a haiku about winter boots. It rhymes in all the wrong places. Everyone applauds. Midway through the meal, the nobleman clears his throat. "I'd like to stay," he says. Everyone pauses. A spoon drops. Someone gasps. Grandma doesn't even look up. Then get a job. And just like that, it's decided. Later, as you help wash the dishes in a bucket of warm water, he asks, "What would be useful?" You think. "Can you carve?" "Poorly." "Sew?" "Only wounds." Cook?" "I can light a stove." You nod. "Perfect. You're hired." Outside, the moon rises slow and full over the rooftops. Snow piles gently on fence posts, rooftops, and the forgotten wheelbarrow that hasn't moved since last August. Somewhere a dog barks once, then thinks better of it. You lie in bed that night feeling the heat still lingering in your skin from the banya. The wooden cross and salt packet rest beside your pillow. The pie crust still tastes faintly of cinnamon and courage. And from the pantry, just before you drift off, comes a soft honk. The goose has returned. It always does. You wake up to the sound of nothing. Not the usual creak of boots outside, not the soft shuffle of Grandma's ladle clinking in the pot. Not even the morning throat clearings of Boris doing his daily judgment stretches on the front porch. Just silence. White, clean, heavy. You pull on your layers with practiced grace. Tunic, vest, trousers, socks, scarf again, mittens, coat, and step outside into a world smothered in snow so deep it's above your knees. "Ah," you murmur, a tantrum from the sky. The entire village is buried. Rooftops barely peak above soft dunes. Fence posts have vanished. One of the communal outhouses is now a gently steaming hill. You begin the sacred morning ritual shoveling like your life depends on it. Because it does. Not because you'll freeze your caftans already steaming with loyalty, but because today is the day of reckoning tax collection. It's not the Tsar's men arriving. That's next month's problem. Today it's Uncle Gavril, the local tax enforcer and part-time potato philosopher. He arrives promptly at noon riding a sled pulled by the angriest mule you've ever met and ringing a rusty bell that clangs with judgment. He stops in the square, dismounts with the grace of a collapsing barn, and pulls out his leather ledger bound with twine and sauce stains. "All right," he bellows, breath steaming. If you owe rubles, rubles. If you owe potatoes, potatoes. If you owe shame, well, I've got plenty. One by one, the villagers approach. Nadia offers 2 sacks of flour and a jar of cherry preserves. The priest solemnly hands over a bundle of candles still warm. Petya tries to pay with a poem. It goes poorly. Then it's your turn. You step forward, basket in hand containing your contribution. 2 salted fish, a hunk of cheese, and a pair of knitted socks with slightly different lengths. Gavril squints. You call this tax? It's mid-tier generosity. He nods, accepts it, writes something in his ledger with exaggerated flair. Behind you, the nobleman steps forward and offers a velvet pouch. Gavril opens it slowly, cautiously, as if it might explode into opera. Inside, dried citrus slices wrapped in silk. The villagers gasp. And citrus in this economy? Gavril stares, stunned. From where? From a monastery cellar, says the nobleman smoothly. Long story. Monks, mistakes, mild theft. Approved, says Gavril, scribbling furiously. You head home victorious. You didn't lose your house. You didn't lose your dignity. You even got to keep your second scarf. That evening, you stop by Elena's to return a borrowed needle. She's sitting by the fire sewing up a tear in what looks like a banner, red, white, and blue stripes fading from age. What's that for, you ask? She shrugs. It's from my grandfather. Used it during a revolt or a wedding. No one really remembers. You sit for a while drinking warm Moor fruit punch made from boiled berries and mild regrets, and watch as she stitches in silence, the banner slowly reclaiming its shape. Then she tells you about her friend in a neighboring village who recently got caught faking his taxes by painting logs and calling them rare turnips. He's now required to teach arithmetic as punishment. The children are suffering. You laugh until you wheeze. On the walk back, the snow crunches underfoot in that perfect, soft-packing way. A sleigh glides past, pulled by a reindeer. You recognize the driver. It's a visiting tradesman from the north, exchanging seal fat and antler combs for wool and gossip. You wave. He nods, then disappears around a bend, vanishing like a fairy tale you only half remember. At home, Grandma is sitting by the fire holding the tax receipt like it's a fragile flower. We did good, she says. Even the socks, you ask. She raises an eyebrow, especially the socks. You settle by the hearth, sipping tea so strong your ancestors briefly wake up. Petya drops by, looking sheepish. I tried to pay taxes in verse, he mutters. We know. They gave me a receipt for not doing that again. Consider it a gift to humanity. You play a slow game of chess with Grandma, who wins by cheating through silence, and then helps you patch the left elbow of your coat while explaining completely unprompted the best way to trap a fox using only stale bread and indifference. Before bed, you step outside one last time. The snow has stopped, the stars are sharp and countless. The world glows in quiet hues of silver. And then you see it. There in the square, standing proudly atop the tax collector's sled, is the goose wearing a sock. Just one. You decide not to tell anyone. Some things are better left unexplained. The next day begins with a whisper, not a bang. You wake to a sky thick with gray, low-hanging clouds that press down on rooftops and make every sound feel like it's being muffled by 1,000 woolen blankets. The kind of weather that crawls inside your bones, rearranges your priorities, and makes your knees whisper regrets from 3 generations ago. You light a small candle, wrap yourself in your thickest shawl, and pad to the window. Outside, nothing moves. Not the wind, not the trees, not even the cat that usually spends its mornings threatening icicles. Something's coming, a storm. Not snow, worse, a sandstorm made of ice. The villagers have a word for this, skvostnyak, a kind of malevolent draft that seems to find your soul no matter how many scarves you wear. It's not just cold, it's personal, vindictive, like nature itself has a score to settle. By mid-morning, the signs are clear. The clouds begin to churn, crows circle low and wide. The goose has vanished. Again, Petya tries to recite a weather warning poem, but the wind snatches his notebook mid-verse and tosses it into a snowbank. Grandma eyes the sky, spits once into the fire, and begins locking the house down. You follow her lead. Every window gets stuffed with rags. The stove damper is sealed tight. A jar of pickled mushrooms is placed on the windowsill as a deterrent. You do not question the mushrooms. Outside, the wind arrives all at once. No polite prelude. It howls through the village like a bandit demanding rent. Shutters bang, chimneys wheeze. The snow is flung into the air and spins sideways like a blizzard with opinions. Inside, the walls groan. The tea goes cold too quickly. Even the fire needs encouragement. More logs, tighter bricks, stronger words. You wrap yourself in layers and try not to hear the storm whistle your name. Grandma lights the holy lamp near the icon corner and begins to murmur. Not prayers exactly, more like negotiations. She throws a pinch of salt into the fire, adds a lock of hair from the last haircut, and sprinkles dried mint into the stove. Tradition, she mutters, and it smells nice. Historians still argue whether Russian storm superstitions were rooted in meteorology folklore or sheer generational spite. Either way, you don't ask questions when someone starts singing to their chimney. By midday, the sky turns orange-gray. Snow no longer falls. It levitates, twisting in midair like it's trying to unfreeze itself into something meaner. Somewhere a bell rings. Not the church bell. A different one, smaller, hung from the post outside the old woodshed. Grandma looks up sharply. The wind's in a talking mood, she says. You decide to stay very still. Later, you huddle with the nobleman and the cat beneath a heavy wool blanket. He reads from a worn leather journal filled with strange weather omens. If snow falls upward, stay indoors. If dogs sleep, belly up, firewood must double. If geese leave without honking, don't follow. You check the pantry. The goose is still gone. By early evening, the storm reaches its peak. The house moans under the pressure. Ice forms on the inside of the windows. You sip tea so hot it peels the lining from your thoughts, then wrap your hands around the mug like it's a sacred relic. Grandma brings out the storm basket, a family tradition. Inside are strange but comforting items. Dried cranberries soaked in honey. A piece of bread baked 3 winters ago, still intact. A tiny book of riddles. A small carved bear that smells like pine and soap. You pass the items around like communion. The bear ends up with the cat, who immediately sits on it. This is accepted. The nobleman offers a story, one about a blizzard that lasted 40 days, and the only survivor was a monk who had trained his chickens to make soup. You're halfway through laughing when the wind screams so hard it rattles the ladle hanging above the stove. Everything freezes. Then a knock. 3 slow measured knocks on the front door. You look at Grandma. She shakes her head. No one goes out. No one knocks. Not during a skvozniak. The nobleman stands anyway. You grab his sleeve. What if it's the wind, you ask? He hesitates. Then the door creaks open on its own. Nothing there. Just a flurry of snow, a swirl of dry leaves, and a single strip of red fabric caught on the handle. You shut it, slowly. The storm lasts into the night. Eventually, the wind fades to a whimper. The sky bruises into quiet, and the village sighs. The next morning, you emerge to a transformed world. Fences buried, tracks erased. Even the chimney on Gavril's house is curled slightly like it lost a bet. But the sun is out, bright, cold, unapologetic. And sitting on the fence post outside your home is the goose wearing a red ribbon. You don't ask where it went. It honks once, as if to say, "Told you so?" The storm has passed, but it leaves behind a village slightly more feral than usual. People emerge from their homes like bears crawling out of the emotional caves of winter. Shutters creak open, doors cautiously swing outward. Boots stomp new paths into the waist-deep drifts. There is snow on top of snow, somehow fluffier, yet more judgmental. You make your way to the communal bathhouse mostly because your hair has begun to form political alliances with your hat. Also, your legs are threatening a walkout if not submerged in steam immediately. The banya is packed. Steam billows out the doors like gossip with a temperature. Inside, people sit on benches wrapped in towels, sweating out storm stress, frozen anxiety, and possibly several minor grudges. You find a spot near the stove, nod respectfully to the birch branches hanging like leafy whips on the wall, and begin the long process of thawing your soul. Across from you, Boris is steaming like a kettle and lecturing a young man about the proper etiquette of banya silence, which ironically includes a long speech about not speaking. Petya is attempting to compose a haiku about steam while actively fainting. The nobleman is already pink from heat and reading a borrowed herbal manual upside down. You grab a venik, a bundle of birch branches, and begin the ritualistic self-flagellation that somehow makes sense when your skin is trying to become soup. It stings, then it burns, then it feels amazing. One woman throws a ladle of infused water onto the stove, releasing a cloud of pine-scented mist that briefly makes everyone see their ancestors. Grandma appears in the doorway wearing her "I told you so" face. She enters, takes a spot next to the stove, and proceeds to outsweat everyone in the room without flinching. She's a legend. After the heat session comes the snow plunge. You step outside into the blinding white barefoot and promptly dive into a mound of fresh powder. It steals the breath from your lungs and replaces it with pure panic and clarity. You emerge reborn, shrieking only a little, Back inside, people are sipping kvass, munching on pickled herring, and exchanging ghost stories. It's Banya tradition. If you don't leave slightly traumatized and slightly relaxed, you've done it wrong. One old man, cheeks glowing like beets, shares a story about the time a bathhouse spirit got into a dispute with a cat, and the village experienced 7 days of unusually aggressive weather. No one laughs. It's probably true. Historians still argue whether Russian bathhouses were centers of hygiene social gathering or light spiritual warfare. You suspect it depends on the day. You leave the banya glowing your skin, steaming, your thoughts silky and your muscles soft as overcooked dumplings. On the way home, snowflakes catch on your lashes. The sky is darkening again, but this time gently like a lullaby folding over the world. As you reach your doorstep, you hear a faint clink. You turn. Nothing. Except the outhouse door is ajar. You approach cautiously. Inside, painted in ash across the wooden wall, are 3 simple words. Watch the goose. You shut the door slowly and pretend it isn't what it clearly is, a warning from something that shouldn't be literate. At dinner, you sit across from the nobleman and quietly slide a pickle toward him. "What's that for?" he asks. "For courage." He nods and eats it whole. That night, you decide to check in on the goose yourself. You bring offerings, a crust of bread, a handful of oats, and a very polite demeanor. You find it sitting near the woodpile, staring at a spot on the horizon with the intensity of someone watching the weather argue with itself. You set down the food, take a respectful step back, and clear your throat. "So, what are you—" The goose turns slowly, meets your eyes, then honks. Loud, once, and goes back to watching the distance. You blink, the wind stirs, something rustles in the forest beyond the village. You feel it just for a second, a shift in the air. Like a secret, remembering it hasn't been told in a long time. You return inside, heart beating a little faster. You lock the door, just in case. In bed, you lie awake for a while, listening to the creaks of wood, the purring of the cat, and the slow, steady breathing of a village settling into another night of frost. And in the dark, you swear you hear it again, that single heavy honk, a punctuation mark on a sentence you haven't finished reading. Morning begins with the comforting sound of boiling potatoes and the far less comforting sound of arguing over boots. You sit up in bed, your blanket tangled around one leg like a polite python, and listen as Grandma and Uncle Mitya debate once again whether boot lining should be first side in or first side out. The argument has gone on for 17 winters. No resolution appears imminent. You dress in silence and slip out the door before someone ropes you into proving it with science. Outside, the village is already humming. Today is market day, the once-a-fortnight occasion where everyone drags out their best turnips, worst opinions, and extremely lopsided attempts at bartering. You love it. It's half commerce, half theater, and 100% opportunity to witness true winter chaos. The market sets up in the town square, wooden stalls popping up like mushrooms after frost. Someone has shoveled walkways through the snow, which immediately refreeze into a kind of socially dangerous ice rink. You slide into the square with practiced grace, narrowly missing a sled it's stacked with fermented cabbage barrels. You're greeted by Raisa the pickler, who insists her cucumbers are blessed by Saint Olga and will cure anything from heartbreak to ingrown toenails. You buy one out of fear, mostly. A man in the corner is selling soap shaped like saints, which feels both deeply respectful and slightly blasphemous. You don't ask why St. Nicholas smells like goat. You simply move on. At another stall, a woman is loudly declaring that her embroidered mittens can ward off bears' frostbite and nosy neighbors. You buy a pair, not for protection, for fashion. They're hideous in the best possible way. Near the center of the square, Gavril the tax collector is doing a brisk trade in firewood bundles and shovels with ominous stains. He tries to upsell you a blizzard-proof sled that appears to be 2 chairs tied to a pig. You decline, politely. You spot the nobleman across the square examining a jar labeled simply mystery mushrooms with a look of cautious hope. Petya is beside him, trying to rhyme fungus with justice. You walk away before they involve you. Your last stop is the apothecary, who is mostly a man named Dmitri with wild eyebrows and a shed full of glass jars. "I need something for winter fatigue," you say. He nods solemnly and hands you a pouch of dried lavender, a feather, and a coin with no markings. "This will help." "Which one?" "All 3. You leave with a mild sense of unease and the pleasant scent of flowers trailing behind you. As the market winds down, you find yourself drawn toward the edge of the square, where a small gathering has formed. A stranger stands atop a wooden crate holding a book. His coat is patched. His eyes are sharp. His voice cuts through the cold. He speaks of omens, of shifting snows, of animals that carry wisdom, and storms that walk on 2 legs. He mentions a goose casually but pointedly. People glance at each other. Then he closes the book, bows, and walks away, leaving behind a single feather on top of the crate. It flutters once, then is claimed by the wind. You return home, brain-buzzing hands full of pickle soap and existential dread. Grandma eyes the feather. "Didn't I burn one of those last year?" You shrug. Later, while helping her chop onions for cabbage rolls, you ask about goose legends. She narrows her eyes, leans in, and tells you about a tale her mother once whispered of a guardian goose that watched over villages, appearing only in winters when the veil between things grew thin. It honks 3 times before something changes, she says, for better or worse. "How many times has ours?" "Twice," she says. "Don't tempt it." That night, a soft knock comes at the door. You open it to find nothing. But on the step, tucked neatly between your boots, is a bundle of red thread and a birch bark note with no words. Just the carved symbol of the same sigil from the book pulled from the river weeks ago. You don't touch it. You close the door, and then you bolt it. Inside, the stove crackles the tea steeps and the cat snores softly beneath the bench. You try to read, but your eyes keep flicking to the window. Outside, the moon is hidden and the stars have taken the night off. And from somewhere deep in the white silence, you hear it again. One single solitary honk, the third. You don't sleep much. The third honk has settled into your bones like a cold truth. It echoes not in your ears, but in the space between thoughts. All night, the wind is still. The stove burns low. Even the cat refuses to move, curled tightly beside the stack of firewood like it's guarding secrets. You rise early, long before the village stirs. The kettle hums softly on the stove and you drink your tea without tasting it. Outside, the snow is untouched, perfect like a canvas the day hasn't dared to paint on yet. You step outside. The bundle from the night before is still there, the red thread coiled neatly and the birch bark note now slightly curled at the edges. You take them both with gloved fingers and tuck them into your coat pocket. You tell yourself it's curiosity, but really it's instinct, the kind that says something's coming. You head toward the woods. You don't tell anyone. You don't even write a note. The air is too heavy for words. The forest is still, too still. The trees, usually swaying gently like sleepy giants, are rigid, watching. You walk a familiar trail, but it feels different now, like the path is remembering itself in a different order. Then you find the clearing. It's old, older than the village, a circle of blackened stones half buried beneath snow. In the center, a tall wooden post wrapped in tattered fabric and carved symbols that look eerily similar to the sigil from the book. And at its base, the goose, sitting, waiting. It looks up at you, not with alarm, not with curiosity, but with expectation. You step forward slowly. Then you hear footsteps behind you. The nobleman. He's wrapped in a long coat, his hair slicked back, eyes wild. "I had a dream," he says. "The goose was there, and the river, and a voice said, 'Follow the red thread.'" You pull it from your pocket. He stares, nods. It's real then. You sit on opposite sides of the post. The goose waddles between you. Then without warning, it pecks at the base of the wooden pillar. Once, the snow shifts. Beneath the post, hidden by years of drifts and silence, is a trapdoor. You exchange a glance. No words, just that old agreement people make with fate. If I'm going down, you're coming with me. Together you pull it open. Stairs descend into darkness. Of course they do. You light a small lantern. The nobleman carries one with him, because of course he does, and together you descend. The air smells like earth, old moss, and iron. The walls are smooth carved stone. Symbols line the passage, curling and looping in familiar, unreadable rhythms. Finally, the stairs open into a chamber. It's round, low, and empty, save for a stone table in the center. On it lies a book, closed, heavy. You step forward. The lantern flickers. The nobleman runs his fingers across the cover. "I've seen this before," he whispers. "In a monastery archive. They said it was lost during the ice century." You blink. The what? Not important right now. He opens the book. Pages filled with strange writing drawings of geese, rivers, constellations, and villages buried in snow. It's a ledger, or maybe a warning. You can't tell. Then the air shifts. A low hum rises from the walls like wind pressed through the mouth of a cave. The goose stands tall, honks once. The lantern snuffs out. Darkness. Then a memory. Not yours, someone else's. You see flashes, villagers gathered under moonlight, binding red thread around trees. A man carving symbols into a doorframe. A child placing salt beneath a window. A woman standing by a frozen river, her breath forming strange shapes in the air as she whispers into the ice. Then silence. The light returns. You're still in the chamber. The nobleman is staring at you. Did you? You nod. Yeah. Back above ground, the wind has picked up, but it's warm now, too warm. The snow is melting, fast. Water drips from trees, from rooftops. The sound is everywhere. You rush back to the village. People are gathering, confused, alarmed. Is it spring already? Someone asks. No, Grandma says, stepping outside and narrowing her eyes. It's something else. You explain what you can, leave out the parts about memory visions and possible time folds. You're not sure you understand them either. But the goose! It walks into the square, sits down, and stares at the melting snow. Petya names it Harbinger. The name sticks. That night, the ice breaks. The river groans, then cracks, then flows, loud and sudden and too early. Historians still argue whether the great thaw of that year was a meteorological anomaly, a spiritual reckoning, or just the goose deciding enough was enough. The village watches the river run wild under the moonlight. Some cheer, some pray, some just stare. And the goose, it stands at the edge, honks once, and walks into the water. Not floating, walking, until it disappears beneath the surface. Gone. You stand there, breath-fogging, heart-pounding, hands cold, and you whisper 3 times, because you finally understand something has changed. The thaw continues. You wake to the sound of water, not trickling or dripping, but rushing, as if the entire countryside has unzipped itself and decided to start over. The air smells different, muddy, sweet, damp, like earth returning to its senses. Your boots squish when you step outside. Snowbanks collapse in slow motion. Icicles drop from rooftops like glass teeth shattering into the muddy slush below. The roads have turned to rivers of slop thick with melted snow, lost mittens, and ancient grudges. The village looks like a story half erased by rain. And in the midst of it all, furniture. Chairs, tables, benches, stools dragged out into the open air. Propped against walls, tipped onto their sides like confused animals. Everyone's doing it. The furniture parade has begun. You ask Grandma why? She shrugs. It's the thaw. Things need to breathe. This is not a metaphor. It's a cultural ritual. Every spring, thaw villagers pull their furniture into the sun, to dry, to exorcise the mildew, to remember what things smell like when not marinated in smoke and secrets. So you join in. You haul out the kitchen bench, which has never not creaked ominously under weight. You bring out the sleeping chest, the one with the missing leg and the mysterious stain shaped like a seahorse. And you very carefully carry out the chair. The chair. The one no one sits on. The one by the stove. The one carved with vines and eyes. The one that belonged to great-great-aunt Vera, who once baked a cake so dense it bent cutlery. The nobleman helps you carry it. It's heavier than it looks, he says, straining. It holds generations of judgment, you reply. Once in the yard, it sighs into the sun like a cat finally released from a sweater. Around you, everyone is airing their lives. Bedding flaps from windows. Rugs are beaten senseless. Boots are left upside down on stakes. Someone's entire cutlery drawer is being blessed with juniper smoke. Petya is holding a stool like it's offended him. Elena is rubbing beeswax into a wooden spoon while muttering about romance. Gavril is sitting on a barrel labeled Buttons Messi and pretending he's not crying. The nobleman has set up a table restoration station in the square. He sands old tabletops with gentle care, humming some nobleman's tune about lost estates and well-mannered thunderstorms. Children gather to watch. He gives one a broken drawer and tells him to follow the grain. The child does not understand but nods with great seriousness. You sit on a crate, sipping tea, watching the village transform itself. Not rebuild, not repair. Just remember, furniture in 18th century Russia wasn't just functional, it was symbolic. A chair was a status, a table was an inheritance, a stool was a sibling. Historians still argue whether the tradition of furniture airing was about hygiene or spiritual realignment. But you can feel it in your bones, it's both. Midday comes, the sun is high, the snow is low. Then it happens. The bench cracks. The kitchen bench, the one you've eaten every meal on since you could sit upright, splinters along the seat right down the middle. You stare. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't collapse. It just let go. You kneel beside it, hands in the grain. It's time, Grandma says behind you. It held long enough. You don't argue. You carry the pieces reverently to the edge of the village, to the woodpile of goodbyes. Their other broken furniture rests in quiet piles, legs sticking out, backs, bent arms folded like retired dancers. You place it gently on top. The nobleman sets down a small carved panel from a cracked drawer, ash to ash, oak to stove. Later, you sit on the porch now, empty of furniture, sipping kvass and eating a pickled egg with the philosophical detachment of a monk. The air is warm, the birds are back. Someone is playing a balalaika off-key but enthusiastically. And then you see it, near the woodshed. A chair. Not yours, not the village's, something older. The vines carved into it twist. The eyes blink. You blink too. When you look again, it's just a shadow, just a warped old seat with no one on it. But you feel watched, and not unkindly. That night you sit on the floor beside the fire. There's no bench now. It feels right. Petya reads aloud from a catalog of domestic objects pretending it's poetry. Someone claps, someone throws bread. The nobleman gifts you a new chair made from repurposed sledwood. It's hideous. You love it. Before bed, you step outside. The moon hangs low, the thaw has slowed. The furniture, all of it now leans with satisfaction. And just as you turn to go back inside, you spot it again. At the very edge of the light, the goose. Perched atop a single wooden stool in the center of the square. Perfectly still, perfectly centered. And as you watch it, does nothing, just is. Like the village itself. You go back inside. You do not question chairs anymore. You wake to a knock at the window. Not the door, the window. You roll over groggy, the quilt wrapped around you like guilt, and squint through the morning light. They're pressed against the pane with quiet intensity as a bundle of carrots tied with string. You blink. Another knock. This time it's Elena standing in the snow, holding a basket full of roots bulbs and potatoes, so aggressively organic they still have opinions. "It's soup day," she says through the glass. "You're coming." You groan, but your stomach makes its own reply. Minutes later, you're trudging toward the communal longhouse, arms full of oddly shaped vegetables, and one rutabaga that seems to hum faintly. Soup day isn't about cooking, it's about alchemy. The moment where the village takes everything left over from the harsh season and turns it into hope with broth. Inside the longhouse, it's chaos, but the good kind. Pots simmer, herbs dangle from the rafters. Someone is peeling onions with the determination of a general. A child is crying because his beat looks like it's judging him. Steam curls from every surface like warm ghosts. And the smell, oh, the smell wraps around your head like a woolen scarf you never want to remove. Grandma is already there, sleeves rolled up, commanding a stock pot so large it could double as an emergency bath. She stirs it with a wooden paddle the size of a canoe oar and occasionally mutters incantations. Probably recipes, but you're not sure. Petya is reading poetry to a turnip. The nobleman is attempting to slice mushrooms while wearing gloves made of fox fur. It's not going well. You take your station next to Raisa, who hands you a knife and a judgmental carrot, and without a word, the two of you begin chopping in rhythm. Thunk, thunk, thunk. Then comes the storytelling. Because soup day isn't just about soup, it's about memory. Each person, as they add their ingredient, tells a story. A real one, a ridiculous one, a family legend, a dream, a lie that feels better than truth. It doesn't matter, the point is the sharing. Raisa begins with a tale about how her great-uncle once disguised himself as a snowbank for 3 days to avoid a marriage proposal. Petya counters with a saga of a goose that laid fermented eggs, which caused an entire village to hallucinate for a week. The nobleman quietly tells of a winter ball where everyone wore masks and no one ever revealed who was who, not even when spring came. Then it's your turn. You pause holding a parsnip and tell them about the trapdoor, the chamber, the goose, the third honk. No one laughs. Raisa just nods. Grandma stirs the pot a little faster. The nobleman quietly adds a pinch of dried herbs and whispers, "It's not the first time." You blink. "What?" He says nothing. Historians still argue whether communal feasting in pre-modern Russian villages was a religious act, a social necessity, or a psychological lifeline. Sitting here surrounded by warm steam and increasingly bizarre vegetable confessionals, you're pretty sure it's all three. The soup is ready by noon. Bowls are ladled out with reverence. Spoons clink, bread is passed, butter appears like a miracle. Someone has brought pickles so sour they might count as a salt. And the soup, it's perfection. Not gourmet, not subtle, but rich, complex, deep, the kind of flavor that makes your soul sit up straighter. The kind that remembers things you forgot you knew. Outside, the sun filters through melting eaves. Children play in slush puddles with sticks. A dog runs by wearing a sock as a hat. Someone sings a folk tune about regret and raspberry jam. The nobleman sits beside you staring into his bowl. There's always a moment in the thaw, he says quietly when the world remembers it's alive, and it scares itself a little. You nod. Later you help scrub pots the size of bathtubs, while Petya teaches children how to tell lies that sound poetic. Grandma slaps his ear with a ladle and tells him truth is hard enough to carry without polishing it. As you walk home full to the eyebrows, you see the goose. Again. Standing near the woodpile, staring at the melted path like it's reading tracks in time. It tilts its head when it sees you, then turns and walks away. You follow. Down the path, past the fence, beyond the orchard, until it stops. At the edge of the forest where a tree you've never noticed before stands tall straight and marked with red thread around its trunk. The goose honks once, then waddles behind the tree and vanishes. You wait. Nothing. Only wind. Only silence. Only the sense that something important has just happened and you weren't quite meant to see it all. You walk home slowly, the soup still warming your ribs, the wind tugging at your coat like a question. That night before sleep, you take out the red thread and tie a small piece of it around your wrist. Just in case, you dream of hoofbeats, not loud ones, soft, muffled like hooves padded in wool. You wake slowly, blinking at the ceiling, half expecting a reindeer to be tiptoeing across your roof like a burglar with antlers. Outside, a strange hush has settled over the village. Not silence, reverence. You get dressed and step out, greeted by a sky the color of melted pewter and air so thick it feels woven. Today is the winter parade. Not the one with nobles and trumpets. No, this is the other one, the older one. The one that takes place in the liminal days between freeze and thaw, when the world doesn't quite know what season it belongs to anymore. At first glance, it looks like a bunch of villagers walking in mismatched clothing. But then you see the details. A girl wearing a dress made entirely of birch bark. A man with boots laced up his arms instead of his legs. Children dragging sleds filled with ashes and seeds. And at the front of the line, the nobleman wearing a velvet robe embroidered with firewood. He's holding a staff carved with moons and wheels, and something that might be a frog. They pass you with quiet nods, feet leaving no mark in the soft mud. You fall in. No one explains the rules. There are no instructions. You just walk. Past houses, past fences, past the church where the bell rings, once not for worship, but for witnessing. Then comes the strange part. You reach the old field beyond the stream. The snow is patchy here, the ground visible in ragged breaths of brown and green. At the center of the field stands a wooden structure, a kind of open frame, half shed, half altar. You've seen it before. It's the summer skeleton. A tall, spindly lattice of wood wrapped in flowers dried from last year, ribbons faded to ghost colors, and bones, real ones, bleached and hung like wind chimes. It should be unsettling. It isn't. This is what the winter parade is for. To carry the last weight of cold to this place. To hang it up. To say thank you, we survived you, and then move on. Each villager steps forward. Offers something. A scrap of cloth, a crust of bread, a poem muttered through chapped lips. Even Petya is solemn, pressing a beet-shaped candle into a crevice between ribs. Your turn. You think for a moment. Then reach into your coat pocket and pull out the last bit of red thread. You wind it around one of the structure's slender arms. Tight, 3 loops, then a knot. And the moment you tie it, a wind passes through. Low, hollow, like the echo of winter itself exhaling. The structure creaks, the bones rattle, and the snow begins to melt faster. Not dramatically, not magically, but noticeably, like a decision has been made. Historians still argue whether these folk rituals had real power or merely gave the illusion of control in a harsh and different climate. But watching the summer skeleton sway, you feel like the argument misses the point. It's not about control. It's about marking survival. The procession breaks up. People wander home quiet, full of something they don't have a name for. The nobleman lingers eyes on the skeleton. My father never walked with us, he says. He said parades were for peasants and fools. You glance sideways, and he smiles. I've always preferred the company of peasants and fools. You walk together, back through thawed fields, past fences unraveling from months of wind, into a village blinking toward spring. At home, Grandma's baking, but not bread. She's making ritual pancakes, thin, slightly scorched, stuffed with curdled memory and soft cheese. You eat 5 without breathing. Was it a good parade, she asks. You nod. She hands you a jar of blackcurrant preserve and a spoon. You understand this to be a blessing. That night, as the fire crackles low and shadows curl in the corners of the room, like sleepy cats, you look at the window. There's no goose, no sigil, no thump or honk or omen, just the glass and your reflection. Looking a little older, a little more thawed, you sleep deeply. And when you dream, it's not of hoofbeats. It's of feet on soft grass in a field of wildflowers laughing in the wind. You're woken not by sound but by smell. Sweet, sharp, earthy, like wet leaves dancing with vinegar. You blink into the morning and realize two things. Something is cooking. That something is cabbage. You sit up slowly as if your body is reluctant to leave the comfort of not knowing what's happening. The scent is stronger now, curling through the cracks in the door and draping itself around your nose like an opinionated scarf. You follow it. In the kitchen, Grandma's at the stove stirring a pot the size of ambition. She doesn't look up. "It's sauerkraut day," she says simply. You hesitate. "Is that a holiday?" "No," she replies, "but it should be." Outside, the village is alive with motion. Barrels have been rolled into the square. Salt bags are being opened like sacred scrolls. Cabbages are everywhere, piled high, gleaming green, some with expressions that imply deep disapproval. The nobleman is helping Raisa carry a wheelbarrow full of them, each one cradled like a baby. Petya is attempting to write a song about brine. The first verse rhymes ferment with intent. It only gets worse from there. You're handed a knife and a cabbage the size of your torso. "Start shredding," Grandma orders. You obey. Thunk, thunk, thunk. There's something therapeutic about it. The repetition, the rhythm, the slight danger of flying cabbage bits. You lose yourself in the sound and the scent, in the knowledge that you're preparing something that won't be ready for weeks. This isn't cooking, it's a promise. As you shred, you hear stories. The man who once pickled cabbage with garlic so strong it ended a relationship. The woman whose kraut bubbled over during a thunderstorm and was thereafter considered a weather omen. The tale of the lost barrel, a cask buried for preservation in the wrong yard and never found again. Those strange things do grow near that fence now. Historians still argue whether sauerkraut's popularity in 18th century Russia was due to health taste or sheer culinary inertia. You suspect the real answer lies in the way villagers chant softly as they layer cabbage with salt-like stacking seasons in a jar. After the shredding comes the pounding. Wooden poles, bare hands, fists. People take turns pressing down the cabbage into barrels, pushing out the air, encouraging the fermentation to begin. It looks like a dance, a very odd, slightly aggressive dance. The nobleman takes a turn and somehow manages to look both regal and ridiculous as he stomps rhythmically on a cabbage pile, quoting obscure French poetry. Petya starts a chant. "Squish the sour, banish bland, let the kraut obey our hand." It doesn't catch on, but he seems proud anyway. You sneak a taste of raw salted cabbage. It's crunchy, defiant, and tastes like anticipation. Grandma catches you and says nothing, just hands you a jar. "Fill it," she commands. So you do. Layer by layer, cabbage, salt, spices, a little dill. You press it down, seal the lid. You scrawl your initials and the date on top, and place it with the others. Waiting. Pickling is patience. It's a way of saying I may not be hungry today, but I believe in tomorrow. The barrels are stacked, the square swept, the knives cleaned. Evening settles in soft and golden. The village smells of vinegar and wood smoke and something older like memory caught in brine. You sit by the fire sipping tea made from dried cherry stems, watching the flames curl into shapes that look suspiciously like cabbages wearing crowns. The nobleman is writing in his journal by candlelight. Petya's asleep with a sauerkraut pillow. Grandma hums a lullaby made of nothing but vowels. You dream that night of a root cellar filled with jars, each glowing softly like fireflies. You open one and the scent carries you home. When you wake, there's still salt under your nails and a smile on your face. Because even the quietest acts like chopping cabbage can echo through the seasons. It starts with smoke. Not the good kind, no birch sweet scent or cozy curl from chimney to sky. This smoke is darker, meaner, full of intent. You spot it early, a low smudge on the horizon like someone's erased part of the landscape. Grandma notices it too. She squints, sniffs the wind, and mutters, "Not again." You ask, "What do you mean, not again?" But she's already wrapping shawls and stuffing matches into a pouch like she's preparing for war. Outside, others are watching the smoke. No one's panicking, but the energy has shifted. Conversations taper off. Laughter halts mid-chuckle. Even the geese go quiet, well quieter. It's probably a field kiln, says Petya, trying to sound confident. Or a chimney that sneezed. But the nobleman's face tightens. No, he murmurs. That's barn fire smoke. You've never realized how many shades of gray exist in smoke until this moment. But he's right. This isn't playful. This is warning colored. You gather in the square. The bucket brigade is summoned, and suddenly everyone becomes their most efficient selves. Lines form, orders are barked, barrels are filled. Even the children snap to attention, carrying wet rags and dousing the dry hay around fences. Someone yells Southfields. The running begins. You grab a bucket and follow. The fire is already dancing when you arrive. A storage barn empty, thank the heavens, is engulfed. Flames lick the sky like they're tasting it. Smoke churns into shapes that look disturbingly sentient. And the sound, a crackling, roaring chorus that feels like it's speaking in heat. Water flies, shovels dig fire breaks, wet coats are tossed over fence posts. The nobleman coordinates surprisingly well, shouting directions in multiple dialects and possibly one extinct language. Historians still argue whether bucket brigades were effective firefighting strategies or elaborate panic rituals with props. As you throw your fifth bucket of water and get hit in the face with steam, you think, why not both? Then someone screams. A child, Masha, has wandered too close, drawn by the light. Without thinking, you move, sprint, dodge, grab. You catch her just as a beam collapses, sending sparks across the grass. You shield her with your coat. You cough. You run. When it's finally over, when the last flame sighs itself out, when the smoke thins like breath let go, you all stand around soaked and stunned. The barn is gone, but the village is not. Back home, Grandma applies salve to your arms, muttering about foolish bravery and ancestral stubbornness. Masha's parents bring you pie. Petya composes a heroic ballad with the deeply inaccurate line, and then they battled flame with only their thoughts. You don't correct him. That night, the nobleman knocks softly on your door. He holds out a small carved charm, a sun-shaped token on a loop of scorched thread. Was in my pocket during the fire, he says. Didn't burn. Thought you should have it. You take it. It's warm, not hot, not cold, just warm. Later, you sit beside the stove and think about how close things came, about how fast flame travels and how fast people forget until it knocks again. You remember the smoke on the horizon? You remember the way the bucket handle bit into your hand. You remember the child's cry? You remember how everyone showed up? Even the goose, though, mostly for dramatic effect. You sleep with the sun token beneath your pillow and dream not of fire but of water. Buckets pouring, rains falling. A village wrapped in steam, held in memory like a clay bowl in careful hands. The fire left a mark. Not just on the land, though. The scorched ground in the south field now resembles a baking sheet someone forgot in the oven, but on the people. For the next few days, the village moves a little slower, speaks a little softer. Even Petya's jokes come with a pause, like they're checking whether the world is listening. You, meanwhile, have discovered blisters. Impressive ones. Heroic, even. Grandma wraps them with cloth and vinegar-soaked herbs while humming a tune so old it probably predates agriculture. The nobleman checks in once a day, usually bearing weird snacks. Today it's fermented turnip slices, which taste like regret and surprisingly sharp insight. For healing, he says, or at least for distraction. But what really surprises you is the feast. Because apparently the fifth day after a fire is in this village a time to cook an outrageous amount of food and feed everyone who helped or just watched while awkwardly holding a rake. Fire takes. So we give Grandma explains setting down a pot of what can only be described as boiled victory. Preparations begin at dawn. The nobleman starts by sharpening every knife in the village, which draws a small crowd, and one duel challenge quickly declined. Petya volunteers to make a cake, but gets distracted halfway through and ends up writing a sonnet to butter. You are assigned to egg duty, specifically cracking them. You don't question this. You just crack, egg after egg, into bowls, into pots, into mystery containers lined with questionable intentions. And as you do, you notice something strange. Each yolk is perfect. No blood spots, no broken membranes, just smooth, rich, golden suns, one after another. By the 20th egg, you're suspicious. By the 30th, you're spooked. Is this normal, you ask Raisa. She shrugs. Sometimes the chickens get emotional. They overachieve. The air smells like onions, meat, and magic. Outside, long tables are dragged into the square. Blankets are laid. Candles are stuck into turnips for ambience. Someone has built a centerpiece out of firewood in a child's old mitten. Then the villagers arrive. and they bring everything. Smoked fish, pickled everything. Loaves of bread braided like hair. Porridge with unexpected raisins. Cabbage rolls so perfect they might be legally protected. And then there's the soup. Oh, the soup. A cauldron is placed in the center of the square, like a sacred offering to weather gods. And the scent that rises from it could rouse the dead, or at least wake Petya, who's dozed off in a barrel again. Historians still argue whether these post-crisis feasts were about celebration superstition, or simply making sure no food went to waste before the thaw. But as you dip your spoon into the stew, you decide it's about rebalancing. Something burned. Now something must be shared. The nobleman gives a toast. It is short, strange, possibly a haiku, but it ends with the line, "Let us be as warm as the fire was greedy." Applause erupts. The goose honks, and the eating begins. You sit beside Grandma and watch the village devour fear, anxiety, and leftover sadness, one mouthful at a time. You listen to laughter that wasn't there a few days ago. You hear someone singing about cabbage revenge. You feel okay, more than okay. You feel like a part of something ancient and honest and entirely ridiculous. After dessert, apple slices dipped in burnt honey, the music starts. A fiddle appears, a drum made of an old box in someone's boot. People dance, badly, enthusiastically. The nobleman tries to waltz with the goose. The goose declines. You join in. At first you're self-conscious, but by the third song, you're stomping in rhythm with Raisa, Petya, and 3 children who've declared themselves the Onion Knights. And when the music slows and everyone sinks into chairs and laps and hay piles, Grandma pulls you close and says, "You did well." You smile. That night, under a moon that looks faintly amused, you lie in bed with sore feet, a full stomach, and a fireless world. You drift off thinking not of flames, but of eggs that never broke, and people who crack open their best selves when it counts. You wake to birdsong, not the usual hesitant chirp of winter survivors, but a full-throated symphony like the sparrows have called a town meeting and invited the choir. You sit up slowly, groggy from too much soup dance and questionable cider, and peer out the window. Something's changed. The snow, what's left of it, is pockmarked with puddles. The thatch glistens, the trees look a little smug, and the air, it smells green. Grandma is already up, of course, muttering about early risers and early blizzards, but even she can't hide the spark in her eye. It's time, she says. For what? For the thaw dig. You stare. That sounds like a punishment. She grins. It's how we find what winter forgot. Soon you're out with the others, walking the edges of fields and fences, holding baskets, poking the ground with sticks. Every spring, as the land sheds its frozen armor, it offers up treasures, things lost, buried, or hidden. The village has turned it into a scavenger hunt / archaeological expedition / wildly competitive sport. Petya finds a clay pipe carved with a suspiciously accurate portrait of himself. Raisa unearths a child's mitten filled with pebbles and a note that simply reads, "For revenge." You stumble across a rusted horseshoe, half a pair of spectacles, and something that might be a tooth from a statue, though it hums faintly when you hold it too long. The nobleman naturally discovers an entire letter sealed in wax and buried beneath a patch of snow-speckled moss. He reads it in silence, folds it carefully, and says only, "I think I owe someone a song." You don't ask. Over by the orchard, children dig with more excitement than accuracy, flinging dirt onto nearby goats. One boy unearths a button, a girl gasps and pulls free a tiny bell no bigger than a walnut that jingles in a minor key. The goose watches all this with the intensity of an auditor. As the sun climbs higher, the baskets fill with odds and ends, a spool of thread, a silver coin, the jawbone of a small puppet, and a perfectly preserved radish that no one dares eat. Historians still argue whether these spring dig rituals were rooted in practical recovery, symbolic rebirth, or simply the irresistible urge to poke mud with sticks. You're leaning toward all three. Back in the square, the villagers lay out their finds like museum curators with very low standards. Petya declares the day a success and awards himself a medal made of string and an old spoon. Grandma proudly displays your horseshoe. "That's luck," she says. "Even half a one counts." Later, you sit on the porch turning the horseshoe in your hands. It's rough, cold, a little bent, but somehow you feel like you've earned it. The nobleman joins you, holding a tin cup of tea and what appears to be a lemon stolen from a monk. "I like the thaw," he says. "Things come back that didn't know they were lost." You nod. It's messy, though. All the best things are. That evening, the village gathers for one last meal before the serious work of spring begins. Tables creak under the weight of pickles, early greens, and a suspiciously spongy dish Petya swears is revolutionary. Someone lights a small bonfire, just enough for warmth. No one panics this time. You all sit in a loose circle sharing bits of the day, finds, thoughts, stories that sound made up but probably aren't. The bell from the orchard girl jingles in someone's pocket. The stars come out and the sky feels deeper somehow, like the cold has finally let go of something it was holding too tightly. You look at your hands, still dirty, still full. You spent the day digging through mud memories and old metal and somehow come away lighter. That night you place the horseshoe under your pillow, just in case. And when you sleep, you dream of earth sighing in relief of roots uncurling of things rising quietly toward the sun. The sky has opinions today. It grumbles, it glowers, it mutters vague threats, but it never quite delivers. You watch clouds the color of wet wool drift across the village like they're looking for something they lost last spring. It's the in-between weather, Grandma says, squinting at the horizon. Not cold enough to freeze, not warm enough to trust. Which means obviously it's time for roof day. You're given no further explanation, just handed a ladder and a bag of onion skins. You ask what the skins are for. Petya leans in and whispers protection against leaks and sky curses. He's probably joking. Probably. Soon, every able-bodied person is on a rooftop checking for holes, loose thatch, and suspiciously persistent moss. The village looks like a board game for slightly unhinged birds, with people hopping between chimneys and squawking at each other about tar and pitch. Your task is simple. Inspect the northern corner of Grandma's roof and apply mud paste where necessary. It's like frosting a very high, very judgmental cake. You spot a crack, press the paste in, and for good measure, tuck a single onion skin under a ridge tile, just in case. You move to the ridge pole, balancing carefully. The view from up here is strange, familiar things made foreign by perspective. The square looks smaller. The trees look closer. The goose looks like it's planning something. The nobleman waves from his own roof hat in one hand, shingle in the other. We should have a signal system, he calls. Flags, maybe, or interpretive dance. Grandma below yells, less flapping, more fixing. Everyone laughs. There's a sense of community mischief in the air today, like you're all pretending to be responsible adults while secretly enjoying the chaos of not quite knowing what you're doing. Historians still argue whether these annual spring roof inspections were genuinely necessary or simply a socially acceptable excuse to snoop on neighbors from above. Either way, they've endured. At midday, a call goes out, tea break. You descend the ladder like a tired squirrel and find a mug of something hot and herbal waiting. It smells like chamomile and ambition. Raisa offers you a pastry shaped like a shingle. Tradition, she says. Also, I only had one mold. During the break stories flow, someone once fell through their own roof into a vat of preserves. A man claims to have found a hermit owl living in his chimney who cursed him with the hiccups for a week. The nobleman swears he once patched a roof using only butter and hope. You return to the rooftop with full belly and slightly less certainty about the structural integrity of butter-based construction. As afternoon shadows stretch, you find a small object tucked under a corner tile. A carved wooden heart, weathered and cracked initials worn almost invisible. You show it to Grandma. She frowns, then smiles faintly. Your grandfather. He used to hide little things up there. Said the wind liked to carry secrets. You turn the heart in your fingers, wondering how many winds have touched it since. You return it to its hiding place, a little deeper this time. The sun emerges for a moment, glinting off rooftops like a blessing. Birds sing not their desperate spring songs, but a calmer chorus, as if the world has briefly agreed on something. You finish your patching, tie off your last thatch, smooth the paste, and then sit for just a moment on the peak of the roof. The village breeze below you. A basket spills over. A child laughs. The wind plays with a loose ribbon. You feel like a quiet god of shingles and stories watching over your little kingdom. Then your foot slips slightly and you remember you are not in fact a god. You are a tired human with onion skin in your pocket. You climb down blistered, muddy, and somehow delighted. That night you feel the faintest drizzle against the window. But no leaks, no drips, no curses. Just rain doing what rain does. You sleep soundly beneath the roof you patched yourself and dream of hearts tucked in secret corners whispering through the rafters. You wake to bells. Not church bells, though they'll join in soon. These are smaller, lighter handbells and sleigh bells, cowbells hung from trees, and someone shaking a tambourine with more enthusiasm than rhythm. It's the festival of the melt. You didn't know it was a thing. No one told you. But now the entire village is dressed in every color that survived winter. Reds, greens, golds, blues that shout against the gray-brown earth. Petya is in a cloak made entirely of mismatched socks. Raisa has flowers braided into her hair, even though it's mostly twigs pretending to be flowers. And the nobleman, he's wearing a cape of icicles. Actual icicles. How, you ask, blinking at him? Engineering and prayer, he says solemnly, as one shard melts gently down his collar. Grandma hands you a hat that might once have been a teapot cozy and points you toward the main square. Go, she says. Today we make fire on purpose. The square is unrecognizable. Stalls have popped up overnight like mushrooms after a warm rain. One sells candied beetroot. Another offers fire-roasted fish wrapped in birch bark. Children run past with sugar-glazed parsnips on sticks like lollipops for extremely confused elves. In the center of it all, the ice sculpture garden. Dozens of shimmering statues, horses, saints, mythical beasts, a perfectly detailed goat playing chess. They glitter in the low sun, some already sweating from the warmth. People admire them solemnly, knowing they'll be puddles by sundown. You wander among them, brushing fingers along cold curves and sharp edges. Everything beautiful melts, someone says behind you. You turn to see a man with a beard so frosted it might be decorative. He shrugs. All the more reason to make it again. Soon the music begins. Drums, fiddles, flutes made from hollow reeds, and questionable tuning choices. Petya takes center square and recites an ode to onions that earns both laughter and mild concern. Then the dancers arrive. Circles form. Ribbons appear. You're pulled into a spiral of steps you don't know. Feet stamping against softening soul, hands grasping strangers who quickly become partners, then friends. You spin. You laugh. You nearly fall into a vat of pickled radishes. And then it's time for the fire ritual. In the far field, a great figure waits, roughly human in shape, stuffed with straw, dressed in old clothes, wearing a mask carved from bark. This is the Melt King, and his reign is ending. Grandma lights the first torch. She holds it high. The nobleman offers the second. You the third. Together you walk toward the figure, villagers following behind, humming a song so old it sounds like wind through bone. You touch the torches to the straw and step back. Flames lick up quickly, hungry after their long sleep. The figure blazes gold and orange, crackling like laughter. Sparks rise into the sky like fireflies escaping winter's jar. You watch, eyes wide. Someone tosses in a bundle of dried herbs. Someone else, a letter never sent. Petya hurls in his sock cape with a dramatic scream of release. The figure collapses slowly, head first, then limbs, until it's just a smoldering pile. The air smells like cedar and cinnamon, and maybe just a little regret. Historians still argue whether this spring fire ritual had pagan origins, Christian overlays, or was simply an excellent excuse to burn old coats. But as you stand there, warmed by flame and community, you think this is closure in motion. Later, you sip something hot and questionable from a carved gourd while listening to children reenact the fire using dolls and inappropriate sound effects. The ice sculptures begin to slump. The goat loses a hoof. The horse bows its head. You watch them soften and smile because it's not sad. Not really. They were meant to melt. That was the point. Art meant to vanish to prove it was real. You walk home under lanterns that sway gently in the breeze. The ground squelches. The stars twinkle. Your cheeks are flushed from fire and dance, and second helpings of candied turnip. You climb into bed with hair full of ash and heart full of color, and dream of flame dancing in the snow of sculptures, turning to steam of laughter echoing across muddy fields. Tomorrow the world will be ordinary again, but tonight it burned bright enough to remember. The next morning the world feels quiet. Not empty, just exhaled. You step outside and the ground squishes beneath your boots. The sky is a soft watercolor wash of blue and bone. Smoke rises lazily from chimneys. A chicken regards you as though the festivities were a personal inconvenience. The Melt King is ash now. The ice goat is gone. But somehow the village looks brighter, more itself, like it's shed a skin. Grandma is humming. That's how you know she's pleased. She hands you a broom and points to the doorstep. Celebration's over, she says. Time to make the place livable again. And just like that, it's clean sweep day. You sweep, you mop, you find confetti in places confetti was never meant to be. Raisa appears with a rag and a bucket, and the nobleman shows up with, of all things, a feather duster shaped like a weasel. Got it from a peddler, he says proudly. Said it used to be royalty. Petya, of course, is pretending to clean while secretly composing a ballad to the ghost of the Melt King. It's called Ashes in My Heart, he murmurs. Or maybe Cinders in Regret, still workshopping. As the day unfolds, each home in the village flings open its windows. Bedding flutters like flags of domestic victory. Carpets are beaten into submission. Jars are inspected. Mice are politely evicted. The children are tasked with cleaning out the well house, which immediately turns into a mud fight of historic proportions. One child claims to have discovered a new species of frog. It is in fact a damp mitten. You help Grandma scrub the stove. She tells you about how years ago a man once tried to cook an entire eel inside it without cleaning first. The stove has never fully recovered. You ask why Clean Sweep Day matters so much. She pauses, then says, because it reminds the house we still care. And sometimes it reminds us too. Historians still argue whether these communal cleaning rituals were about hygiene superstition or simply psychological resets after long winters. You suspect it's a bit of all three, with a dash of inherited stubbornness and just the tiniest sprinkle of guilt. After lunch, turnip stew again. No one pretends to love it anymore. You take a walk. Just you, the breeze, and the bare branches that almost seem ready to try again. You find a few crocuses poking through the dirt, stubborn and purple. A bee buzzes by like it forgot what season it is. Overhead, a hawk rides a wind current in slow, lazy spirals. At the edge of the woods, you spot something that makes you stop a fox. It's standing still, watching. Then it blinks, turns, and vanishes into the trees. You don't follow. You just smile and turn back. Back in the village, the final brooms are being hung up. Someone's tied a ribbon to a rake in celebration. The nobleman's weasel duster now lives on the mantle. Petya's ballad has grown 2 extra verses and a chorus that suspiciously resembles the melody from a cabbage jingle. Evening falls soft. You sit with Grandma as she darns socks and tells stories that drift from truth to fable with the ease of a well-oiled spinning wheel. And just as the sun dips below the hills, the bells ring once more. Not for fire, not for celebration, but simply because someone felt like hearing them again. Their sound floats through the air like a promise. Tomorrow will be muddy. Tomorrow will be filled with chores. But tonight is still spring's first exhale. Still the lull after effort, still the quiet between storms. You head to bed with clean sheets, tired limbs, and a sense that maybe, just maybe, you understand something about this place now. Something about endings that are also beginnings. And how sweeping a floor can be sacred if you let it. You fall asleep to the sound of wind nudging shutters and a single brave crocus tapping gently against the windowsill. The last morning comes with a softness you didn't expect. Not a fanfare, not a farewell parade, just a hush, the kind that settles when something has finished blooming, even if it didn't realize it had been blooming at all. You wake slower. The light through the window is warm around her. The goose honks exactly once, then resumes its meditative state. Grandma is already up, of course, stirring something in a pot that smells like root vegetables and reassurance. You sit at the table and she pours you a mug of tea without saying anything, but her eyes say, I see you. You did well. You're part of this now. It's almost time to go. Not because you want to, your heart might be partially composed of pickled turnip at this point, but because the world calls and muddy boots don't clean themselves. The village knows. They don't make a fuss. They never do. Raisa hands you a satchel with bread, cheese, and a suspiciously cheerful jar of jam. Petya reads aloud a goodbye poem that includes the line, like snow on cabbage, you arrived. Surprisingly, the nobleman bows, hands you a tiny carved spoon. For memories, he says, or emergency stew. You take one last walk. Through the square, past the half-melted statue bases across the field where the Melt King met his glorious end. You wave at the orchard now, buzzing faintly with the sound of ambition and early bees. The path out of the village is damp but familiar. You look back once. The rooftops glint, the bells chime, and then you walk on. You carry it all with you, the onion skins, the soot-smudged laughter, the fire and the melt, and the mornings that smelled like soup and something more. Historians still argue whether people stayed in villages like this out of tradition, necessity, or deep love disguised as stubbornness. You don't argue. You just know this: you came here in winter, and you left in spring. And that means something. It always does. You sleep that night in a different place under a different roof, but your dreams are mud-lined and maple-scented, full of songs that rise from thawing ground. And when you wake, wherever you are, part of you stays behind. In a cottage with a clay stove. In a town square covered in slush and stories. In the flicker of a fire lit on purpose. So now as the story closes, let yourself breathe a little slower. The village has fallen quiet. The frost has gone soft at the edges. In the sky, it stretches wide and pale above sleeping rooftops, humming lullabies made of melted snow and firewood smoke. You feel the warmth of tea in your hands, even if it's only in your mind. You hear the creak of wooden doors, the soft snore of a well-fed cat, the shuffle of feet across clean-swept floors. Everything that needed to burn has burned. Everything that needed to thaw has begun. And everything left is calm. Let your shoulders sink. Let your thoughts scatter gently like flower seeds caught on spring wind. Let the last embers of this journey glow behind your eyelids, not with urgency, but with quiet affection. A flicker that says, you were here, and you mattered. The world outside can wait. Tonight, you've curled up in something older than comfort, older than story. You've wandered a place where even the smallest kindness, a ladle of stew, a hand on your shoulder, a joke shared over muddy boots was a kind of warmth. So rest now. You're safe. The village is quiet. The fire is out. And somewhere in the dark, a goose sighs contentedly. Good night. Sleep deeply. And dream of soft bells.